tyranny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, December 22nd, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Karen Levy, professor at Cornell University and author of Data-Driven: Truckers, Technology, and the New Workplace Surveillance. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelesnkyy addressed Congress in person yesterday, his first overseas trip since the Russian invasion. This comes as Russia has announced its intention to increase its troop size. No end in sight for this barbarity. Mitch McConnell thought the government funding negotiations were going a bit too smoothly. So, Senate Republicans led by Mike Lee are now holding it hostage over, naturally, Biden trying to get Biden to keep Title 42 in place on the border. But Richie Neal's pet provision that gives private retirement accounts less oversight and less taxation? No problem. Same with Boeing's goodie that they got after millions of dollars in lobbying. The omnibus bill would waive a safety deadline for airplanes that was supposed to be met next week. Another week where jobless claims have ticked up, so the Fed's labor discipline is starting to work. The IRS did not follow the rules and didn't audit Trump during his first 2 years. But they did so for every year of Obama and Biden so far. Something to note.
These agencies, it's the deep state, they're all out to get me.
Except in this instance.
They just hate Republicans. It's unfair.
They're trying to make me look lazy. Like I didn't submit my taxes to them. Sean Hannity was questioned under oath in Dominion Voting Systems' $1.6 billion lawsuit against Fox News. And guess what? He said that he, quote, did not believe some of the election fraud claims made on his show. Whoops.
Rhino.
In Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu is back, baby. And he's announced that he's formed a government which includes a coalition with the far-right settler nationalist religious Zionist party. Although, frankly, they're just saying the quiet part out loud.
Fresh off of his appearances on Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin's show.
Oof.
It's what you do before you form a far-right government.
Yeah. And lastly, U.S. life expectancy has dropped to its lowest level in 25 years due to COVID and overdose deaths.
You don't think it has people...
The flu, I mean, sorry.
I was going to make a mask as stopping oxygen for people getting to people's brains.
Yeah, it was not the face diapers that did it. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Or a Majority Report, as you call it, the final one of the year. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. We've got a great show for you today. Sam is out, as he is on Thursdays. But tomorrow, we're having a very special show. It's going to be Calls and Clips. That's what I call it. Calls and Clips show. Matt's favorite. But we will be taking your calls tomorrow throughout the program and doing clips. It'll be the final live show of the year. But next week we'll have our best ofs, and I'm excited for that because we aggregated our best for the year.
Yeah. Also, a pro tip: if you are going to be one of the folks who is going to like get on the phone lines early tomorrow, write a few points down.
Right. Okay. There we go. Yeah. Just Matt saying, do your homework.
Some helpful
essentially.
advice.
Yeah.
And with the utmost level of respect, if your impersonation is good, that's fine. But really, really make sure it's good.
And if you're a libertarian, please just call in earlier.
Yes, like call in
Earlier in the day.
earlier
And
the
hang
better.
up if it gets to like 2:00. Just hang up.
Yes, please. Please. That's your Christmas or holiday gift for us. With that said, I can't believe that Kevin Brady has found his niche here, Republican representative, and that he's sticking with it. I guess he saw that people responded with indignance and, frankly, mockery when he was speaking publicly about Donald Trump's tax returns and saying, this is a real slippery slope. What could it lead to? Supreme Court justices' tax returns being released? Oh, let me clutch my pearls. I mean, I would love that. I would love a lot more information on our Supreme Court justices. As I like to call them, the high priests of America. They feel that they're above reproach. They have no ethics standards. You have a situation where a Supreme Court justice can just choose, like, NBD, I'm going to not recuse myself from a case that involves my literal wife, an organization that she has organizations that she has affiliations with. There should be some recourse for that, but there is not. And yet, Kevin Brady, despite that being the case, decided to not just say how he felt to the press about protecting Supreme Court justices from oversight at all costs. Here he is saying it on the House floor.
The president makes their tax returns public or not. Today is not the law. And while I would recommend it for all, the truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, this is political targeting. It can be applied not just to the president, but to every American. And I am worried that it is not just public officials at risk, it is private citizens. It could be supporters, it could be business or labor leaders, it could be the Supreme Court that some have sought to delegitimize. That's our concern here. This is why we are fighting this fight as Republicans, to protect the privacies of every American, to make sure they are not targeted by partisans in Congress. Now,
that is hilarious to me. I mean, the only way that you can really sell it is by saying that it's going to happen to everyday Americans. Everyday Americans understand that their tax information is in the hands of the government because they do their TurboTax in April.
Yeah, and if Congress wants it, they'll get it.
Yeah, it's not that hard. That's the thing. The reason that we want tax returns public for public officials is because we pay their bills.
This is like when they're trying to say, like, if they can shadow ban the president, they can shadow ban you. It's like, no, we all know we get shadow banned all the time. The fact that the president can get shadow banned for saying, like, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, means that he actually is, like, sometimes under the same sort of level of scrutiny that we are sometimes. So, like, this sort of thing where, oh, it might it's an attack, or it might delegitimize the Supreme Court if we know about their tax returns. That's a Supreme Court problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's no trickle down oversight.
Privacy.
Because, that's not how it works. He's trying to frame it like that, but the problem, and I think most people know this, is that the people of the top don't have the same standards that the rest of us do. And so when they are making decisions that are going to affect, say, I don't know, half the population, when they decide to overturn a Roe v. Wade, when they're making decisions soon about millions of Americans if they're going to get student debt relief, and they're going to side with Republican states that clearly have no standing in their lawsuit, I might want to know if they have any interests financially in organizations or affiliated organizations that are pushing that kind of case. If you have somebody named Rep Kavanaugh who has some significant baseball ticket debt and that got paid off, and we don't really know much about that, I would like to know. These are things that most people actually want. There isn't enough of a bootlicking population for the Supreme Court, which is at a historic low in terms of polling in the way that the American people view the job that they're doing. There is not a constituency out there that wants them to be shielded from accountability. He just has to pretend like it's going to affect all of us, because what he really is just doing is fortifying the castle walls and putting more alligators in the moat. And then he's pretending like this is for the everyman. I mean, it's the oldest trick in the book for Republicans.
It's weird about him saying this publicly, though, because he said this right before they went into a closed session. So this is meant for a public audience. Clearly, he thinks he's getting something by putting out of it. And I think our guess is correct. He's trying to get sort of the Supreme Court and the people who have move so much money to make the Supreme Court the way it is, start moving money to head this off. But it is extremely important that we know, particularly if we have these sort of justices basically above the law. We should at least, and given lifetime terms for as long as they want, we should know about that, because the Brett Kavanaugh debts thing, one person's debts is another person's asset. Mm-hmm. And they have an asset in Brett Kavanaugh in that. And that, it's disgusting that we
just
don't
ask creditors
understand
how
that.
they feel about inflation, and then you'll understand what debt as an asset, right? Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder who he's connected to on the Supreme Court, where he's getting his marching orders from on this front, and what they actually know about Brett Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas specifically, who was, and I saw a piece in Slate today where they were saying that the January 6th committee really dropped the ball on including language about Ginny Thomas in their final report on this, and I'd agree.
Well, of course, the final reports, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the final report is crafted by, there are Republicans on that panel, Liz Cheney included. And that's the limitations of what they've provided, is that they haven't gone far enough to connect Trump and the insurrection to the Republican Party broadly, and part of that's because they have Republicans on the panel, and that's what they do.
The other problem here is this is also a message to Democrats saying, hey, if you do this, we're going to come after you and use this new weapon that you've created. And I think I worry that might scare some Democrats off, and I would just say hold the line, because
we know which side is more exposed. I mean, we have Nancy Pelosi.
Both sides are so exposed, which is why I'm worried about this actually having some sort of ability to stop this without actually knowing where the votes are on it. But
I don't think the tax returns have any value, for Trump, for Democrats politically, really, because we've known that he's a tax cheat his entire life. And he used that effectively against Hillary Clinton when she was using it to target him in the primary, or not in the primary, I'm sorry, in the debate. And she was like, well, he hasn't cheated on his taxes, essentially. And he said, well, that's because I'm smart. Americans don't like taxes, and they feel like, the rich get out of paying taxes, so I should get out of paying taxes to a degree. I mean, it's not everybody, but the point is that it's not an effective attack on him. People like the idea of I could get around this. Cool. But we should still force the tax returns out. I agree. I just think the political value is being overstated. The point that I think is most important about this is that it shows how little oversight people in power have generally, and particularly the Supreme Court, which Kevin Brady is fixated on. They have no ethics laws. They have nothing that's actually a check on their power. It's lifetime appointments. They are acting with impunity, and they're political actors that are, by their own actions, delegitimizing the Supreme Court. It's not some outside force that's delegitimizing the Supreme Court. It's the way that they behave and operate on a daily basis. And part of that is because we have no structure in place to hold them accountable. I would love some structure in place to hold them accountable, starting with their tax returns and starting with an ability to recall them, impeach them, get them out of office more easily, in the case of Clarence Thomas in particular. And let's start there. That's what I am riled up about with this fixation on the Supreme Court. But
also, Dem SCOTUS justices should resign so we can put younger people.
Yes, Ian Millhiser has a great piece out in Vox saying, and I saw some of the responses to it. People are like, oh, "How dare he?" But saying that Sotomayor and Kagan should consider resigning because they're in their 60s. They should
do it.
Yeah, if the Republican Party is going to put, tween Supreme Court justices on, and I kid, but they're getting younger and younger, and there's a reason for it. There's no reason that the Democrats should unilaterally disarm.
You either have to deal with the structural reasons that the Republicans are doing that through, I would say, removing the Supreme from the Supreme Court and make it just like that's the real problem is like, this is an institution that isn't meant to be responsible to all of us.
Yeah.
It was given to us by slave owners, and like we've slowly tried to adapt it, but it's and ultimately like we just can't have it as a co-equal branch where these people are granted lifetime appointments. Like we just can't do that. I'm all for all the reform things, but this just doesn't work.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have we're going to take a quick break soon, but we have a quick word from one of our favorite sponsors, Sunset Lake CBD. I use it daily now. I'm really into it. I use the melatonin CBD tincture pretty much every night, and then sometimes the gummies if I'm having a harder time falling asleep. But they really are great. And there is a sale happening right now, starting yesterday, ending on Sunday, December 31st, right before midnight. So up until the end of the year, all new hemp smokables, flowers, and smalls are buy one, get one free. Mix and match cultivars to find your new favorite. No promo code is needed, but you can use the Majority Report one if you so choose. I was skeptical of CBD before, or CBD, because I if you just go to the corner store or whatever, it's trash, and there's no real oversight on the actual product. But Sunset Lake changed my entire perspective on using CBD. It really is a great product. It's releasing its new 2022 hemp flower. The cultivars you know and love will be joined by Candy Kush, a hybrid great for helping you ease into bed. Sunset Lake CBD is a majority employee-owned business that pays a minimum wage of $20 an hour. Their farm uses regenerative farming practices like cover cropping, crop rotation, and grows all of their hemp without the use of harmful pesticides or synthetic fertilizers. And as I say, you can feel it. Starting today through the end of the year, all of Sunset Lake CBD's hemp flower will be buy one, get one. Mix and match cultivars to find your new favorite. No promo code needed. Again, visit sunsetlakecbd.com to try these amazing new cultivars and take advantage of this sale while it lasts. It ends on December 31st. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be joined by Karen Levy. We are back, and we are joined now by Karen Levy, professor at Cornell University, author of Data Driven, Truckers, Technology, and the New Workplace Surveillance. Karen, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. So we hear a lot about a trucker shortage in this country. I find the phrasing a bit curious, given the fact that these are human beings, and you write about this too, how they're basically treated as infrastructure despite being people. But we don't hear much about the reasons behind said shortage. I guess let's start there, and then we can dive into some of the history that got us to this point and the very very terrifying point in terms of surveillance and treatment that we're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, a trucker will be very quick to inform you that there is not a trucker shortage in the United States. What there is a wage shortage. There are plenty of folks who are equipped to do the work, who have their commercial driver's licenses, who would like to do the work, but the way we compensate truckers in this country and the degree of kind of infrastructure we afford them to do their work, like that's insufficient. So the churn rate in trucking is really high. In some segments of the industry, it's like 100% a year. Like every trucker leaves their job every year on average, for some kinds of firms. And so it's just the kind of job that like chews you up and spits you out in many ways. Like truckers make about $47K per year. In 1980, they made about $110K in today's dollars. So like their wages have just tanked, and they're like away from home all the time and like can't make doctor's appointments, and like their work is really difficult and unsafe. And it's been equated sometimes to sweatshop labor in terms of the amount of hours they work and the wages that they make and the risk that they put themselves at. And so all of those things like are not recipes for a lot of people wanting to stay in those jobs for a long period of time.
And the reason that the wages have fallen to that degree, I mean, you can trace them back to very concrete decisions in our history, to unions being undercut basically since the 1970s, and you write about that. Do you mind telling that story a bit, Karen?
Yeah, sure. So trucking in the United States has been formally deregulated since 1980. It was like one of the industries, one among a few, but like one of the big industries, for which there was this big deregulatory push in 1980. And so what that meant is that, up until that point, the federal government played a much more active role in setting rates in the industry and creating barriers to entry for new companies. So like you had to go through a whole process if you wanted to be a trucking company. And in 1980, they were like, we're not doing that anymore. This is just a pure market. And so what that meant was like several things, right? A bunch of companies went out of business. Rates plummeted. So there was like kind of a race to the bottom in terms of cost. And the other thing that sort of got competed away was truckers' wages, right? So that's when we started to see this like crazy marked decline in how much money truckers were making. And it's been pretty stagnant. Like that's been kind of just what trucking has looked like for about the last 40 years. Like wages, you would think, right? Like oftentimes we would sort of intuitively assume that wages would go up if there's such a shortage, but that actually hasn't really happened in trucking. The solution has been to like come up with kind of fresh meat. So, to the extent that there has been a policy like that, we tried to address these problems via policy. The way we've done that is like by trying to subsidize new driver training and like get more people into the industry, but not necessarily to deal with some of the things in the industry that make it such an unlivable job.
Yeah, and I want to get into some of those tweaks in a bit, but I just wanted to underscore the precipitous decline in union membership among truckers and how that you can just see that in dollar figures. And people associate trucking with unions, I think, from old tropes about it and old realities, but union membership is way down since the period that you describe.
Yeah, it's in like the best numbers I can find are like low to mid single digits. Like, and I've had a lot of conversations with truckers, and I have yet to find a trucker who was like gung ho about unions. A lot of folks, even if you ask them about unionization, truckers are like very autonomous people. Like a lot of them got into the industry because they didn't want somebody looking over their shoulder, which we'll see becomes ironic. Because now a lot of people are looking over their shoulder, right? They didn't really, they're not crazy about kind of the structures of organizations or of government. They just want to do their work in their own way. And so unionization, you're right, like it used to be, like the Teamsters were essentially a trucking union, in the heyday of, like the 70s. But today there is just very negligible in long haul, in like the long haul segment, there's pretty negligible union membership. In delivery driving, it's a bit higher, right? Like your FedEx and UPS drivers, there you see a bit more, or in port trucking, like some of the more specialized industries. But the folks who are going over the road for like hundreds of miles at a time, it has like a very, very small role.
The hundreds of miles at a time that you described there, I mean, this is essential to the functioning of the economy as we have it, constructed. And we just saw essentially Biden participate in union busting, or at least he's strike. I shouldn't say union busting. That's the wrong word. But he broke the strike for the rail workers, and that was because it's so essential to the economy, right? And that the workers in the rail industry got the short end of the stick there because they were unable to get what they bargained for. And it's kind of a similar dynamic with truckers in that they are essential, and yet there has not been any progress in the past few decades in giving them what they need to live lives that are healthy, to get paid and compensated for what they provide for the economy. And it's gone really the opposite way.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I mean, we like to talk a big game, especially maybe post-pandemic, about essential workers and how valuable they are and how much we appreciate them. But as you point out, right, truckers are like about as essential as it gets, like in all circumstances, right? Like truckers have this saying, if you got it, a truck brought it. Like basically everything you have, like everything you're wearing, everything in the room you're in right now, like there's a very, very strong chance that everything in that room was on a truck at some point, right? Like they just touch everything. And, that people sometimes talk about like the digital age and how it changes work. But like, if anything, trucking is more essential in the digital age because we now all expect our like Amazon Prime deliveries very quickly. We want to know where everything is. We've come to expect things, like when we want them, like on demand. And, somebody pays the price for that. And as you point out, not only I think have we not kind of met the call in terms of the wages we give these folks, but we also fail to provide a lot of the infrastructure that they need to do their work safely. So, truckers need places to like pull over and sleep at night or go to the bathroom or like just do essential human things. And what you see, arising is like towns saying, kind of NIMBYism, right? Towns saying like, well, we don't want a truck stop because we think there's going to be crime there, or, trucks can't drive on our roads, or truckers can't use the bathroom, stuff like that. And that's been going on, as you point out, for a long time. And I think we are only now like starting to see some folks in Washington start to recognize that like that is not a way to treat an industry that we desperately need.
And so with Washington getting involved, that kind of brings us to the surveillance that you talk so much about in your book. Instead of regulating the industry to pay their workers and to give them lodging, bathrooms, like you describe, there has been a different approach that's been taken, and it's quite troubling. And also, this is cross industry, essentially, this kind of worker digital surveillance that we're seeing, but it's more pronounced because of the conditions of this industry that we laid out previously. Talk a bit about the rise in the surveillance technology in the trucking industry.
Yeah. So, one of the biggest kind of most pervasive and longstanding problems in the industry is fatigue, right? So truckers are by and large paid by the mile that they drive, like at like a certain number of cents per mile. And so they're only paid for the time that they're actually moving, right? So they're very much incentivized to stay on the road as much as they possibly can. They don't get paid to sleep. They don't get paid while they're waiting to be loaded or unloaded, or while they're doing an inspection, or any of the other things that like are definitely part of the job, but they're just not compensated. So they're incentivized to do all this work. And because of that, because that's the compensation structure in the industry, and because, as you point out, right, like these are folks who are severely undercompensated for their labor, there's a drive, there's an incentive to drive as much as you can, because that's what you have to do to kind of keep the lights on at home, right, or to feed your kids. In response to that problem, right, there are federal rules that limit how much truckers can drive. And instead of kind of addressing these root causes of overwork and the fact that a lot of people were kind of violating those rules pretty regularly, the federal government has, since 2017, required truck drivers to be electronically monitored to kind of, and the goal is, right, to make sure that they're complying with these timekeeping rules. Before that, they used paper and pencil logbooks, and kind of nobody took those requirements very seriously because they had to put food on the table. So the goal so the approach then has sort of been like almost like policing, right? To kind of institute this surveillance, to know, where truckers are and what they're doing, how long they've been driving, So this is accomplished via what's called an electronic logging device, or ELD, which all truckers have to use. What's interesting about the ELD, well, there's a couple things. I mean, there's a whole book's worth of things about the ELD that I wrote. But, one of the interesting things about it is, first, as you point out, the approach is not, let's actually solve these underlying root problems, which are economic. Let's instead kind of, use tech as like a Band-Aid on this problem, right? So we won't actually address the fact that nothing, we haven't changed anything about how drivers are paid, or like the fact that they have nowhere safe to pull over. Instead, we'll just kind of crack down on them via this digital monitoring. And then the other thing that's happened in trucking, and this ties in, I think, to your point, Emma, about kind of all kinds of workplaces being under more surveillance, is that the electronic logging device has kind of provided this backbone for truckers, the companies that truckers work for, their employers, to also then monitor them in a whole bunch of different ways, right? Like, they already had to buy this device that's hardwired into the truck. So now that they had to buy that, like, it's not that much of an extra cost to like monitor things like how much fuel the trucker is using, or how hard he's braking, or, whether he's gone out of route, or all kinds of things, even up to and including some, pretty intimate like biometric monitoring, cameras trained on the driver's face. Some of those have use AI to detect if a driver's eyelids are fluttering, or if his head is nodding because he's too tired. All kinds of stuff, right, is kind of entering the scene. And it's all like ornaments on a Christmas tree or something. Like, the government was like, you have to buy a Christmas tree. And then, the trucking companies and third parties that are also interested in this data kind of hang the ornaments of additional surveillance on the Christmas tree, right? So now truckers are kind of under a bunch of different eyes all at once.
I mean, what I would do if I were in that situation, if I was a trucker, would be I'd try to get it like an Adderall prescription. I mean, seriously, right? And
yeah.
I mean, you talk about how the usage of stimulants, it was a real issue. And I mean, this is kind of a second order, but it is important to know that this has been a problem in the industry, because that's the only way that truckers can stay awake and do their jobs to that extent.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, right? And this is a long-standing problem, right? Like, truckers have been kind of under the gun to do their work under all kinds of conditions that are inhospitable, or that kind of stretch the limits of what their bodies can do. And they've used all kinds of different solutions to address that, including, sometimes illegal stimulants or illegal stimulants, stuff like 5-hour energy, things like that are really common. And I think like what that demonstrates, because this is so longstanding, is that, again, like, these are not technology problems, right? Like, these are economic problems. We've decided that the way to deal with this is to stretch people past their limits, and or to kind of, surveil them so that we can make some inference about how tired they are, rather than just like paying them for the actual hours that they work, for example, so that they're not forced to kind of exploit their own labor.
I mean, that is, it's deeply troubling, and it is indicative of a larger philosophy of technology solving all that I think it's a problem across multiple sectors. We encounter it, I think, when we talk about the ways that algorithms can filter out, hateful content when it comes to social media companies and stuff. And there's this almost like godlike quality that people ascribe to technology, like it's going to fix everything, when really a lot of this is just one, this creates more pressure on drivers when they don't need it, and two, this can be solved by simple solutions where we don't have to have all of this digital monitoring. You just increase wages, don't make it tethered to their time on the road, and put in place the protections that you describe.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I think we often use technology as like duct tape or something, right? We're like, well, we could solve this problem, but doing so like upsets the balance of power in some way, right? Like requires that, that power be redistributed, or that, wages be fairly significantly, increased for particular laborers. And because of that, it's appealing for policymakers to say like, oh, what about this like shiny thing? Like, won't this solve the problem? One of the things that's interesting in trucking is that, if the problem the logging device is supposed to be solving is like safety, right, or is fatigue, it isn't even doing that, right? So even on its own terms, it's kind of failing. The studies that we have show that since this technology became mandatory, truckers feel that the rules that they're under are so much more stringent, like the timekeeping rules are much more stringent, right? They used to have a little bit of wiggle room about, kind of how they would report how long a trip took. And now they don't have that wiggle room. And so as a result, they drive faster, right? They drive more recklessly. They drive in conditions where they really shouldn't be driving, because like when the clock is over, it's over, right? Like they can't kind of twist it like the way they used to. So, even if we accepted that technology might be a solution to an economic problem, it clearly doesn't seem to be in this case.
I'm wondering if you heard about the story of the Rajal Aguilera Menderos. I'm sorry if I'm butchering his name. I can see from.
You might have to keep me up to speed on that. I'm not sure.
No, it's okay. It's just this is a bit of an aside. I apologize, but he was a trucker, I think in Colorado, who was sentenced to over 100 years in prison after his truck was it killed some people on I-70.
Yeah,
it ended up getting reduced to 10 years. But in reading, your book, that's what it reminded me of, which is just the idea that, I mean, he's going to bear the brunt of that as opposed to the people that he was working for. It's just another gut punch. I didn't remember his name, but yes, I'm familiar with that situation. And I think that is, indicative of kind of this broader phenomenon, right? Which we see in all kinds of domains, not just in the workplace, where the risk is kind of still placed on the worker, on the person who has the least power to change things, right? And we sort of say like, well, we'll just watch you super closely and make sure you're doing all the things you need to be doing. But that, again, like doesn't change the fact that the things that they are told to do, and sometimes companies tell them to do it, right? Like many times in my research, a company would pressure a driver, would tell a driver like, you shouldn't break the rules, but also like we need this stuff to move. So you sort of put drivers between a rock and a hard place where, they're not able to make a living and they're doing this work that we tell them is really valuable, but we don't show them is really valuable by paying them for it. And then we add this monitoring on top of that, which, I think many people are subject to more workplace monitoring than they used to be, but like truckers are really subject to it. Like it's pretty intense, the kind of scrutiny that they find themselves under. And a lot of us just wouldn't stomach it. And in trucking, actually, the folks who are the least likely to be okay with it are the safest drivers, right? Like the people who've been doing it for years or decades at a time. And, like they're used to doing it their way, right? Like they're professionals, and you tell them like, guess what? We're going to like watch your eyelids now and tell you when you're too tired to drive. Like those are exactly the people you want behind the wheel. You want to be next to that truck on the highway. And those are the folks who are leaving because they're like, why should I do this? Like, why am I doing this? Naturally. Right. What are some of the ways that the companies that aggregate this information, and that's a lot of information on your employees, do they sell it? What do they use it for outside of the ascribed purpose?
Yeah, they have all kinds of things that they do. So, one thing that they do is the kind of like predictive analytics or workplace analytics that we see a lot of different companies doing. So, before there was really no way to know like who is the best trucker. Like that doesn't even really make sense. Now, like truckers it still doesn't make sense, but like now we can score truckers, like a lot of truckers get these scorecards that are issued like via this digital monitoring that give them some score. Oftentimes the companies all have different ways of doing it, but like a common thing is how much fuel they're using, because that drives costs up. So they're really concerned about that. So they get some, like employee of the month sort of thing, or they get ranked, like several companies I talk to will rank drivers and show them the rankings or give them some little gift card or something if they are the most fuel efficient or they have the best safety record or whatever it is. And that is like, again, something a lot of workplaces do, but it's just so new in trucking, right? It really changes the way that truckers think about the independence of their work. And then another thing that companies do is they'll try to make predictions. So sometimes they'll try to predict, which driver is going to leave, or like I had one guy tell me like, oh, if the driver starts his days later, that might be a sign he's like going through a divorce or something, right? Like they try to like look for kind of big data insights, when like they could just talk to the drivers, right? And find out if they're doing okay. But then, business analytics. And then there's also kind of are data grabs by third-party companies. So insurers, of course, are interested in all this data about truckers and where they are and how they're driving. There are other companies that try to sell like parking spots, for example, right? Like truckers need to be able to reserve parking spots to sleep. And there are companies that will sort of use this data from the logging that we now have about all these drivers around the country to kind of price out parking spots and like, allow truckers to reserve those spots, things like that, right? So there's a lot of value to be derived from this data, but like very little of that value is actually seen by the workers themselves.
Right. And you also just speak about how the truckers in this case are canaries in the coal mine for larger electronic surveillance in other industries, and I'm hoping we can zoom out and talk about that as well. I think Amazon and their proposal for zapping bracelets if you're too idle made the rounds in the news, but there are keystroke trackers at office jobs. If you're typing, you got to be typing a sufficient amount of time, etc. This is happening in many different sectors. Throughout your research, what were some of the examples you found in the trends?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that it's, especially post-pandemic and kind of the new work landscape that involves more hybrid work, these things are just rolling out like crazy in all kinds of industries. You mentioned warehouse work, factories, like a lot of what people think of as blue collar labor have dealt with these things for a long time, but they're also rolling out across kind of more professionalized industries like medicine and law and finance and things like that. So they really are sort of coming for everyone. There was a New York Times article not long ago about productivity tracking. And one of the examples, one of the people that they talked to who was subject to this kind of gamification of their labor was like a hospice chaplain who got some number of points for like how many visits she made to dying people. I mean, it was just like a wild example.
Chaplain?
It was, yeah. It's like someone who, tends to people as they're dying.
You gotta measure the chaplain's productivity.
I mean, like how many points was that worth? So
how many God points?
So, I really think you're hard pressed to find industries or professions that aren't facing this in some way. And, I think it's definitely something to continue to be on the lookout for. It's also important to recognize that like there's a long history to this stuff. So the goals of management are not that different today than they were, 100, like in the Industrial Revolution, right? Like workers have been monitored and watched for the sake of productivity or efficiency for decades or centuries, right? But there are some things that are changing now, including, reaching out to kind of new workplaces, right? So truckers, you couldn't have done this kind of work 20 years ago, because like if a trucker wanted to talk to their manager, they would go to the payphone when they felt like it and call the dispatcher, right? Like there was no knowing what they were doing most of the time. And then the types of analytics that companies will sort of run, especially predictive analytics, to try to make predictions about like what their workers are likely to do. Those are fairly new developments. And another thing I think has been really interesting, actually a student told me about this, is the use of companies keeping an eye on what their workers are doing either on social media or like on LinkedIn to kind of get a sense for like, are they planning on leaving or, are they sprucing up their resume, something like that, which, I think potentially crosses a line into the kind of thing that an employer, really ought not to do. But we see more of those types of things too, services that are marketed to big companies saying like, oh, now, we'll keep an eye on your employees' LinkedIn profiles so you can get a sense for whether they're going to leave, stuff like that. So, it is a really pervasive phenomenon. And truckers are maybe kind of at the bleeding edge of some of the things we're seeing.
What do you feel that there's a role for some of these like major consulting firms in pushing these practices on these companies? Like I could see a place like McKinsey aggregating this information and spreading it throughout different sectors just because they're hired guns and they'll be like, look at how they cut costs or look at how they monitor their labor in this way.
Yeah, I think that's a smart point. I think there is always a desire to quantify and measure what people are doing. And oftentimes what we fail to kind of account for is that like some things are just hard to measure, right? So you can pretty easily measure how many emails somebody sends or like how many minutes they have a document open or whatever, like you can figure that out. But you can't as easily track whether, you have a really meaningful conversation with your colleague, or you have some great idea, or whatever it is, right? Like things that are actually probably more meaningful about work are, they're just harder to measure. And that doesn't often stop us from still, kind of like wanting to spit out some number or some score for people, right? And I think you're right that is kind of in alignment with the managerial consulting perspective on the world. But it's just a poor fit for a whole bunch of different kind of work, including trucking work and, just a whole bunch of different industries folks are in. I think you'd actually be hard pressed to find an industry where like you could easily like enumerate all of the things they do and just count them, right? Like there's a lot of kind of, soft work or wiggle room around the tasks that people do that is really important, but it's hard to track.
We have some people writing in with questions for you, so I was hoping you could respond to them.
Okay.
Prairie Fire Kowalski, our good friend Kowalski, wrote in saying, could you ask your guests if state laws like in Nebraska that allow farmers to drive semi-trucks without a CDL for farm use has impacted wages or safety?
That is a good question. I don't have a lot of intimate knowledge about that law in particular. But yeah, so we do see some variation across states. So the long haul industry that I've been looking at these are folks who are driving like I think it's more than 100 miles or more than 150 miles from their base routinely, right? So the folks that you're talking about are not kind of covered by some of these monitoring rules, but we do see states kind of actually adopting some of these things. So in California, for example, which is obviously a big state, we're starting to see California law talk about maybe implementing some of the same monitoring capabilities. Not really an answer to the question, but there is some kind of back and forth between the states and the feds on these.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, really fascinating discussion. I'm trying to think if I have one more question for you, because I feel like I do, but it's the time of year where everything leaves my brain.
I'm right there.
Someone wrote in also, Teamster John says, these pressures on drivers to extend the dock leading us to damage freight or worse, overload trailers. That's a good point as well. Is that something you found as well, that they're having to overload their trucks in order to make sure that they're carrying as much as possible?
I had not heard that, but that's really interesting. And and at the ports, I could definitely see that might be something that comes up.
Gotcha.
So I don't know. I'll look into that.
Well, your book is great. Really encourage people to pick it up. Late holiday gift. If you procrastinated like we all do on that front. Karen Levy, data-driven truckers technology and the new workplace surveillance. Thanks so much for your time today, Karen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Of course. All right. Well, with that, a bit of an earlier fun half, but I don't care.
No, this is actually the time that we typically are supposed to get.
Yeah, no, we've gone pretty late with some of our first hours last 2 weeks. So
it's the profit motive, pressure on truckers, pressure on podcast producers.
Yeah,
too, as well.
I mean, I hope we're not electrically monitored for doing a 50-minute first hour.
We're electrically monitored. Everybody sees, like, if we start the show at 12:05, we hear about it from a whole bunch of people trying to discipline labor.
I know, honestly. Why do you guys work for the bosses in the YouTube chat when you're crapping on us?
Volunteering to crack the whip. Come on, guys.
I mean, yeah. Stop being such simps for power. Anyway, with that, we will head into the fun half. We'll be taking your calls, reading your IMs. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning. Check out our conversation with Xander Corvus and Summer Hart about porn stars' view on things like workplace safety and free speech. Also, on January 22nd at the Cutting Room, Left is Best New York, Left is Best New York, featuring Jason Miles, This is Revolution, Ben Burgess of Give Them an Argument. Get your tickets. There as well will be Sam Seder and Emma Vigland. So you'll want to be in attendance at the first show I've ever done, at least, in Manhattan. So get your tickets. We should put the link maybe in the comment description, or the YouTube description here. So look for that, folks, and buy tickets.
Definitely. Sam and I, both there. It'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to it. On ESVN today, we're going a little bit early. doing an earlier show. I have a commitment to do something. Anyway, it's just the holiday season, lots of family stuff. So we gotta do ESPN a little bit early
Hopefully
today.
that family member is not watching.
Yes. No, I mean, it's fine. It's just I'm tired. I'm already tired from the holiday season. Lots of stuff I gotta do. But soon it shall be over, and then I will relax next week. That'll be great. YouTube.com/ESPN show. Bradley and I will be making our picks against the spread for a Christmas edition of the NFL. It's been a great competition between us. Bradley went 3-0 last week, but I went 2-1. It's that time of year where I start to heat up, but Bradley's hotter right now, unfortunately. Still a close competition. Check that out, youtube.com/ESPN show. And it's not advice, but it is, we've been hot lately, both with our picks. So youtube.com/ESPN show. All right. Oh, and also check out Doomed, Scam Economy, Matt Binder's 2 shows on youtube.com/Matt Binder. I was on Doomed on Tuesday, so you can check that out. And Scam Economy should be tonight.
This is a year in review?
Yeah, it was, but mostly we talked about Binder being banned.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the only thing that really happened.
Yeah, exactly. So check that out. And then, of course, Scam Economy, Brandon's wonderful show. All right, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. We are back. We are going to be having Brandon once again in studio. So he's on his way. It'll be very, very fun. And right now, Matt Binder is on a media tour because of the
He's
banning.
consorting with the enemy right now.
Yeah.
It's a little bit touchy.
Elon really Streisand affected Matt Binder as well as his own jet. So good. Binder's having the time of his life with this, and as he should. I'll read some IMs here. Kowalski, I asked that. I hope the answer was good. Improper. Can you clip and post the conversation with Dr. Mark Allenderry for Wednesday's show? It was an important discussion that could help convince some vaccine skeptics in our family. I think we will post
I imagine we will, yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully it is able to persuade them too.
It was good with all those visual aids as well.
I mean, that's the thing that is really disgusting is the amount of death that this has caused us just to be like, I don't know, like Matt Gaetz saying, like, if you're still wearing a mask, like, we just assume you're ugly. And it's like, bro, you lost 80,000 people in your state. Almost 90.
I mean, it is incredible. Banana Republican, living paycheck to paycheck, I have so much anxiety every time I do my taxes because I worry a mistake could lead to a fine or a penalty I can't afford. When rich people complain at all about tax rates or transparency, it makes me want to start a guerrilla revolution. I know. I mean, we have an understanding that the government has all of our information and could deploy it if necessary, or like put us in jail for it.
Or investigate it.
Or investigate it, right. For like Donald Trump or for anybody who's wealthy or for, again, the Supreme Court justices, it's just an inconvenience for them. They have some accountant that will do legal finagling, and that's that. Cisgender male says, for the unaware, Matt Binder's Twitter account has been reinstated. Oh, there you go. We'll get his take on how that worked out. Freezing Kowalski, I think this will be my final IM. Due to the car accident last month, I have been stuck driving a diesel pickup. The fuel has gelled over in this minus 20-degree weather, and I'm slowly freezing to death on the side of the road. All right, I had an additive in the fuel. If I survive, I'm going to the old school method of 5% gasoline blend. Wow, 50. Okay. Left is freezing. I don't think this is actually Kowalski, and I don't think it's a particularly funny joke to say that he's dying, so
and
thanks.
I mean, call AAA or something.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, man. MIDI Doctors, old stream, first hour still open.
Yeah, not any more MIDI Doctors, so watch it.
Star Fox, Emma, can we please get a birthday shofar for our comrade Riv in the Discord? He turned 68 years young last Friday and wants you to know that he's still successfully dodging the draft. There you go. Good job. He's an invaluable member of the server and shows us every day that a boomer is only a state of mind. Left is timeless. We'll do a Matt shofar or a regular one. No, it's okay. Matt is walking to the soundboard, and you will get that shofar. Happy birthday, Riv. Fake Masters, hey, I just wanted to send a special safety message out there to the men in the audience. Several young men in Chicago have been found drowned in the last year after wandering home drunk from a party or bar. We tell women all the time to look out for each other at parties and bars, but men are told it's okay for them to walk home alone. This holiday, men look out for each other too. Roni fan, I work in construction and know the trucking issue firsthand. The experienced workers were paid to quit or realized they weren't getting enough to do, so there is now a huge experience deficit. The new workers are paid much less and offered no benefits, so they keep quitting. Yeah.
I mean, you see that industry after industry is, a lot of old folks getting edged out because they had higher expectations, and you get the younger people in that are more desperate, and you can undercut wages of older folks. I mean, this is why a lot of journalists are 25-year-old kids of people who like lawyers.
Yeah. shot at me. 28-year-old.
Sorry.
I mean, it's the truth. I would not have been able to pursue this if I did not have I lived at home for the first 2 years and I was working, not making like anything.
The Obama administration was conscious of this. Ben Rhodes said, like, you know, you do these briefings and there's nobody over the age of like 35 with institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
And that, who does that really serve? That serves the people who are trying to save a buck on paying reporters, and it serves power who likes to deal with reporters who, you know, weren't around for Iran-Contra.
Right. Kowalski said, that was actually me. Sorry, meant for that to be more funny. Just frustrated that my fuel additive failed. Not going to die. My sister has come and rescued me. Okay, good. I didn't anticipate. It was a different handle, so I thought it wasn't you.
The sense of humor gets a little bit dark once it gets below zero out of the Great Plains.
I completely understand. All right, let's take a call really quick. Calling from a 510 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, would that be me?
That would be you. Who is you?
Excellent. This is Hamish from Tahoe. Hang on just a second. I'll switch off the headset.
Great. Thank you.
It's always better on the phone, isn't it?
Yes. Hi, Hamish. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. We are the one place that is not freezing in the nation right now out here on the West Coast. And I've tried to call y'all to talk cashews before.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Are you still snacking?
Honestly, I haven't been like a cashew. I haven't like restored here in a while, but I kind of I perfected my eating situation so that I can get through the show. And I've gotten better at it, so the cashews are less necessary, but still a big fan.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then maybe my advice or my thoughts are out of date, but I was wondering why you maybe didn't go for a liquid option, which is a quick and easy way to get some fuel in. Is that what you ended up doing?
You mean like a protein shake?
Yeah, something great like that. Be great.
I mean, I don't know. It's just cashews. It's $6. That'll fuel me for as a snack for a few weeks. Hey, that's it. I don't need to get a protein shake every time. It's cost effective.
Okay, I get it. Fine. Well, I hope that works for you. But
Thank
still,
you.
And to get off that, to stay still on nutrition, I wanted to. I've asked you guys to be skeptical about veganism before, and before you groan too much, I just want to say that I understand there's a really difficult area. Can I tell you how it is difficult to have conversations with this when I guests that might have a more pro-beef, pro-livestock view of things from a nutritional and also ecological level?
Sure.
Okay. It does. People that advocate for including animal source foods in your diet tend to be like favorites of ranchers and rural folks. And you know how most of those people lean politically. So there is a real tendency for them to cross-pollinate with COVID deniers and conspiracy theorists that think that the black helicopters are coming and we just need to lower taxes and get the government out of our lives. So I had one guest that I've sent a couple of emails trying to push them, but then I hear them go on places like the Daily Wire and do anti-vax stuff. And I'm like, God, I wish you could just be a credible source on nutrition. So I just really wanted to say that. I hope that you guys can find a source to maybe get a little more information before just having a knee-jerk response that is anti-meat. But also, I'll get off the air now. If you have any thoughts, though, on how to approach these topics where there's a strange mixture of politics from the right and the left, the wellness space is another one of them. I don't know.
That comes to mind.
If you care to comment.
Sure.
Okay, I'll hang up now and listen off air. Thanks.
Yeah.
Take care, y'all.
Thank you, Hamish.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Hamish.
We should probably do this again on Left Reckoning, but we did a farm report with Kowalski actually, where we did talk a little bit about the it's sort of like a land use thing, like the you can't just grow like protein crops anywhere you want. For instance, certain things are more suitable for like husbandry and animal grazing and that sort of thing like that. If we're trying to like maximize getting maximum amounts of like protein to people to basically feed them. I think that maybe Kowalski has some insight on that, because I do think like that is the problem. Is I'm not going to have somebody on who's like, yeah, eat pro meat, and also Fauci is doing sort of China population control on everybody. Like,
yeah, I think the pro meat element that he's describing is much more of like a bro science, like pseudo masculinity branding exercise that is not connected to like the ecological complexities that Matt is describing here. There might be a gap there, but I think the gap is probably more just because like the reality that's being discussed and debated here is so far away from anything that we're even approaching right now with our consumption that it just is more, it's a little pie in the sky to even be talking about like, you know, how much meat consumption will be good in society once we trend towards veganism, because we're so far away from even approaching like mass veganism that right now the problem is too much meat consumption. So that's where the focus is.
Yeah. And I like Kowalski's like refocus, which is like we should, whatever like the solution is to this thing, it basically needs state investment through like, and taking money from capitalists who are only going to put it towards like McDonald's and stuff. Like you need to be making sort of like greenhouses that can operate year round in places that are close to labor, which Kowalski, I thought that was such a great point. Like make greenhouses in sort of like Rust Belt cities and stuff like that, where the labor's close by and you're actually like building sort of capacity up to feed people that is a little bit more insulated from the environment and isn't super requirement of these sort of like glyphosate type of fertilizer stuff to grow and use more and more sort of land for those sorts of crops. Like I think those sorts of things, it needs to be whatever, to the extent we're eating less and less meat, to me, it's not going to be because people like saw documentaries like that's gross or unsustainable. It's because their options are increasingly available because they're state subsidized.
Dude, guy passes. I'm begging you, convince Sam to not do all call show tomorrow. Pro beef guy. I feel like we made our opinions known. But not much we can do, right?
I've been heard, and that's as much as I can expect.
We will be having Matthew Film Guy will be joining us though, so at least so at least so you know that we'll have some buffer.
Matt, you really are embodying Michael's distaste for calls as well.
Calls and pop culture on MR. Matt's favorite episode.
Pop culture doesn't matter. Actually, we were supposed to talk about that documentary series.
I didn't get to watching it.
We'll do that on the way back. But no, it's fine.
I will over the break.
What is it again? It's like don't answer the phone.
Don't pick up the phone.
Don't pick up the phone.
Man, it's this documentary. Folks should watch it. We'll talk about this on the when we come back from break. But this documentary about this guy who was making these phone calls to fast food restaurants, making managers strip search employees in like the 90s and 2000s. Hundreds of instances of this, and there's a lot to talk about with it.
All right, I will check it out. While we're waiting for our friends Binder and Brandon, let's do this teachers thing that we had yesterday. So not too often do we play a Dr. Phil clip on this program, but this is an important conversation, and it's happening on Dr. Phil's program, although, you know, his framing of it is, well, you'll see. They're talking about education and COVID and how those two things relate. And here he is speaking with Corey DeAngelis, who is a school choice activist, a fellow at the American Federation for Children.
This is the anti-teacher union hack.
Yeah, that's That's what that is. And this guy essentially makes the claim that teachers' unions did not want to go back to in-person learning during COVID because they wanted to steal from the taxpayers. And that, frankly, this is the right-wing position. That was a lot of what was driving their return to school mantra. It was a way to undercut teachers' unions and labor. But here's this discussion that's happening on daytime TV, and like a lot of people watch this show. So,
Corey, you say that teachers unions are substantially to blame for public schools staying closed during the pandemic. Why do you say that?
Absolutely. There are 6 rigorous studies on the topic. I did the first one with a co-author named Christos Makrides. And each of these studies found that places that had stronger teachers unions, all else equal, were substantially and statistically less likely to reopen their schools in person. And the reason for this is pretty obvious to me. I don't blame the people in the system. I blame the incentives that are baked into the system itself. Think about it. The private schools were fighting to reopen from the get-go, but you had the public school teachers unions fighting to remain closed. And the main difference there is one of incentives. That one of those sectors receives children's education dollars regardless of whether they even open their doors for business. But it was actually even worse than that with the COVID school closures, because the teachers unions started to understand that they could actually hold children's education hostage, essentially in perpetuity, to secure multiple multi-billion-dollar ransom payments from the federal government. And it actually worked out for them. There's about $190 billion in so-called COVID relief that have been allocated to K-12 education since March of 2020. That's about $3,000 to $4,000 per student, on top of what the government-run schools are already spending of about $16,000 per student per year. Most of that money hasn't even been spent yet. According to the Wall Street Journal, 93% of that funding to this day hasn't even been spent. So the public school teachers unions, I don't blame the people in the system, but they did have an incentive to keep their doors closed to secure these ransom payments. In Chicago, 2 weeks to slow the spread turned into 2 years to flatten a generation of children. You had a Chicago teachers union strike vote in 2022. They were still fear-mongering about reopening schools. The same union had to delete a tweet saying that the push to reopen schools is rooted in racism, sexism, and misogyny.
Yeah, let's stop at that.
Well, there's a lot to say. So go ahead, Matt.
Well, I just wanted to, let's work backwards from that point. That they always mock this idea that it was rooted in racism, sexism, or classism, and the truth is clear if you look at the polling and who supported forced back to school in-person schooling. It was richer, wealthier parents and more white parents, and the folks who wanted to make sure that there was better distance availability and more safety were lower income and less white folks. Like, that's just true.
Yeah.
And like the thing is like,
and that overlaps with the private school claim as well, which also overlaps with the fact that many of the teachers in private schools are not a part of a union, so they didn't have the ability to make that case to the private institutions.
And they had way better support for things like distance learning and stuff entirely. So like to entirely gloss over that is ridiculous. And the other thing we have to understand here is like, and I don't know if he even gets to in this clip about comparisons globally, but like, first, it's not clear to me entirely that the like loss in attainment is because of schools staying a little bit closed more than the other ones. I think it's probably the things that have always led to inequality in attainment, which is like we aren't funding these schools properly, and there's massive inequality in how we're supporting our kids through these sorts of things. So like to blame it on the teachers unions for being the only place that really stand up in a country that was like Sweden, for instance. People say like these Scandinavian countries, they went back to school sooner. They also have healthcare, like universal healthcare and a universal like a public health authority that isn't so bifurcated and price discriminated, and or even you're not even in it at all, to where you're not getting messaging after that.
And strong unions that have like an infrastructure that allows them to go toe to toe with any other interests. And if they agreed to go back to school, that was because of bargaining with that union.
And why was it like those sorts of groups? Like why were richer people more gung ho about getting back into school, it's because they were insulated by things like health insurance and things like that.
And then working backwards from what he said there too, one is that they had an incentive to keep schools closed because they were receiving hundreds of millions of dollars in money that was provided for in COVID relief. That did not go to teachers. There's no evidence that that went to the teachers. That's just a way to, it's right-wing speak about the government handouts as well. And then saying that they held children's education hostage. I mean, this is what they do to undercut teachers' unions. They cry the children, the children, the children, protecting the children, as if teachers don't have like an intimate love and an understanding for what children need. They are in the business to be around children, to educate children, and they do it at a low wage. They wanted to help children as well, but they wanted to be safe. And so these ghouls use the children as a shield when what they are really trying to do is break the backs of laborers and force them into positions where they have less power. And this clip is as illustrative of it as anything that we've talked about, Matt, in particular. So it's just, what a freaking cretin that guy
This is everybody who thinks we minimize COVID too much too. And like the idea that what's a complaint that they got this money allocated for them and it wasn't spent. Like to me, that sounds like a system that needs federal overhaul and not like greedy people, because they would have spent it on themselves or like Rolls Royces or like frivolous things in the break room or whatever, right? Like it's clear that we do need. I mean, that's the problem, is we needed a federal school program through the Department of Education that's like, okay, we're going to make sure that every teacher that's in these unions is assured that there is, ventilation, that we're not like cramming too many students into one room, that if people do start getting sick, which is what was happening in Chicago, it was a year ago, like there's something like, okay, everyone's getting sick. It's very clear that the school is becoming a vector for transmission. Like so we can either break unions and force teachers to get sick, or we can move to remote learning, which, by the way, these parents wanted. And that is the real problem here, is like all these people, they basically just see this as an opportunity to attack teachers unions for what they say is like an overreaction against COVID, when we all know that that's not the reality here. And to the extent that like it was unwise, like for instance, if I was a dictator during COVID, I would have said, we're not opening bars, we're not opening a lot of this stuff until we can make sure that we can do schools. But we decided not to prioritize things like that. We decided just to like say, let's just go for it. And because otherwise it was authoritarian, we had all these same people saying like, oh, if you say people can't go to the gym, it's basically authoritarian. And like, I think all this stuff should have been data driven, and the extent that you have teachers getting sick, then you should have an opportunity to like slow things down.
Yeah. Should we keep going, or was that basically the gist of it? Yeah.
Reopening schools. The same union had to delete a tweet saying that the push to reopen schools is rooted in racism, sexism, and misogyny. You had the same teachers union ridiculed because a board member was vacationing in Puerto Rico in person while railing against going back to work in person.
Okay, so let's break all the teachers unions in this country because of some dumb asshole. Whereas, like, what was Ted Cruz doing? I don't know.
But this is heavily funded. I mean, this kind of it was a little less explicit in the middle of COVID because there was anxiety about children and staying home and how does that affect their learning. But now that COVID is over, to them essentially, we're still living through it and we're in a surge right now. Get your bivalent shot, but everyone's in school. There is a treatment of it as if it is endemic to a degree, and there are no school closures. They are being a bit more explicit in what their intentions were, which was that this was an opportunity to break the backs of teachers' unions.
It's shock doctrine.
Yeah. They saw an opening and right. And And the system was weakened to such a degree because of decades and decades of people like Bill Gates saying, like, we need to make schools smaller and privatize and outsource public funds to this kind of technologically innovative learning system. And we saw the results of that. And the Gates Foundation admitted in print it was a failure and they were not able to achieve their goals. And yet we still deal with the ramifications of that weakened system, which creates an opening for these kinds of ghouls to make this claim.
It's infuriating because the weakness that they caused in this system, they're using it as a basically like a point of attack after. So just read from U.S. News. When asked if they felt they had the resources and support they needed to teach effectively during the pandemic in spring 2020, 61% of public school teachers said yes, compared to 66% of charter schools and 76% of private school teachers. The strain was particularly acute in schools with high levels of student poverty, namely where 3/4 or more of student body qualifies for free or reduced priced lunches. In those schools, only 59% of teachers felt that they had enough support. These frustrations may help explain why half the teachers in a recent union poll said they were considering leaving the profession. I mean, this is terrifying, I think, and we need all hands on deck fighting this sort of thing. And I see people like Max Blumenthal had that Jay Bhattacharya guy. Like, all these guys are gunning to attack public sector unions, particularly teacher unions, in the name of you protected us too much from COVID, i.e. like held students learning hostage for that in a pandemic that killed over 1 million people.
And under the guise of saving costs for the federal government,
Yes.
when this guy didn't say boo about the PPP loans that went out and incentivized like influencers to sit on their ass and take that money and not have to repay it. Like, fine, the PPP loan program was fine in conjunction with all of the other things. But the problem is that, and when they give away the game, is that they said nothing about that.
Also, and you know what they said nothing about is different attainment levels in different parts of the country for students and falling behind attainment. Like, let's address that. That requires a massive expansion of what we do in schools. There shouldn't be student lunch debt for a fucking start. No kid should be hungry or financially anxious about how they're going to put food in their stomach when they're going to school. You should also extend school programs throughout the summer, because that's when kids, particularly from low-income families, fall behind. Like, these are things we know the solutions of, and it's not breaking the fucking teachers union.
All right, well, with that said, we would like to welcome our fun half friends. Here he is, Brandon Sutton in studio, and then Matt Binder. Well, we're setting up their shot, actually, so they'll be, but you can hear disembodied voice.
It's
Brandon
a pleasure
Sutton.
to be joining you in studio again, despite my harrowing journey to get here, which I will not go into detail.
Harrowing, not heroin.
Oh, well, no, I mean, not heroin, but harrowing. Did it sound like I said that?
Is it raining out there?
It is raining out there. You
A
probably
lot?
can't see it in my hair, but, you know, it's moist.
I got like some like weather notification from my like building, like be aware, high winds, wind. So whatever.
Yeah, it's windy. It's a little bit more than misty, you know, like when sometimes you're out there and it's not raining, but there's like water in the air and you can feel the drops, but they're not really dropping.
All right.
It's not like that.
You're
at all.
walking through a cloud, basically.
Yeah, it's like but now it's raining. It was like that when I left, but now it's like raining, but the drops are like really like spaced out. So like it's like, you know, it feels like if you tried hard enough, you could dodge them, but obviously you can't, because that's not how rain works.
That's not how it works. Move the mic a little closer to your mouth.
You can dodge the raindrops if
There you go.
if you try hard enough.
Weather report from Brandon. Hello, Matt Binder.
Hello, how are you all? Sorry I'm late.
Nice
No,
haircut,
it's okay.
Binder.
You're making the rounds. You're a big celeb.
Yeah,
I just did.
I want to say I saw you on the BBC. I saw you on the BBC recently, Matt.
Wow, yeah. I somewhat, my favorite, I don't know if I said this on here. I don't know what I've said on anything now anymore. I finished recording an episode of Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinski's show, Crystal Kyle and Friends.
Nice.
My favorite though was someone posted a photo of them saying, you know, they said it was posted on the Majority Report subreddit. They said, I'm in my hotel walking through the hotel lobby in Dubai. And I look up and it was me on BBC on the lobby screen.
Yeah, you told me that on Doomed. Pretty cool.
Right, there we go. Okay, yeah, I couldn't remember. It sounded like I told you, Emma. I just wasn't sure where I said that though.
Right, there you go. Well, I let the people know that I was on Doomed before we headed into the fun half. But really quickly, why don't you guys plug your shit?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I'll go first
So,
since I have
go
less
ahead.
going on. We'll have a holiday episode out for everybody this holiday season. I hope you're all excited. I'm excited. There's been so much going on in the crypto and Twitter and then also like the real world space. So, I'm sure some of my co-hosts will have something to say about that stuff. I'm mostly interested in the digital landscape that we're into now.
Okay.
So like prepare yourself for Christmas listening.
That's what the discourse is now. It's all crypto.
It's all crypto all the time.
Both the discourse capital T, capital D, and both the discourse lowercase t and lowercase d. Just, yeah.
When people think TD, they think of the discourse. And that's the they think of my intermittently released podcast and not all the other, not the bank touchdowns.
That's why I bank with TD Bank. I thought you were getting my money, Brandon. Is that not true?
I mean, I can only hope.
What's happening on Scam Economy and Doomed?
Right. So on Doomed, I had a really horrible guest, just the worst. I could not believe it. But no, Emma Vigeland came on the show. Did you tell them the story that why you visually were not on the show?
Well, all right. Like it makes me come off like a diva, but so basically what I do is I bring my makeup.
I've waited years now for Emma Vigeland to come on to come on Doomed.
Yeah.
And she finally agrees to come on. And hours before we go live, I get a text message saying, Binder, I can still do Doomed under one condition though. Audio only.
That's how it went down.
What?
You're right. I held it hostage. No, basically, like I bring my makeup into work and I leave it here for the week. If I have a special event, I'll remember to bring it home. This was like the first time I had forgotten to do it, and I'd gone to the gym and I hadn't done, like I'd taken all my makeup off and I was like, oh my God, I have to go all the way back to the office. Like this is before Doom. This sucks. And I could have done it without my makeup, but whatever. I don't. I'm a girl and I get to do that. And so then in the end, Binder was kind enough to say, I'll just do, you can just do it audio only. So I didn't have to trek all the way back here. So thank you for that. It was a fun discussion
problem.
though. Yeah.
It was very fun. So, we talked about Emma sort of acted as the host as she asked me questions about my Twitter ban. And then I asked Emma about, a year in review, because it's probably going to be the last live Doomed of the year, because only a week left. And then so check that out. It's at doomedcast.com, the podcast version, and then youtube.com/MattBinder. And then over at the YouTube channel and at scameconomy.com, the latest episode of Scam Economy just dropped with Molly White of Web3 is going great. And we basically talk about how she was in one of the last Twitter spaces with Sam Bankman-Fried and the questions she asked him. We talk about his arrest, the 2 congressional hearings on FTX that happened last week, and everything that happened up until that moment. And so check that out. And then next week, I will drop another interview on Scam Economy with Molly White, where we basically take a look back at some of the craziest crypto grifts, scams, and frauds of the year. I found out some new ones that I wasn't even familiar with. So definitely check that episode out. It's going to be, it is a lot of fun. It's already recorded, but it'll be a lot of fun for you when you hear it the first time.
The crypto landscape has changed so much in a year. Like last year around this time, it was like Squid Game token had like rug pulled $18 trillion or something from unsuspecting investors. And now we're just like in a whole different world.
Crypto was even on the way up during this time last year. Like we were still in a boom. We were still in a boom period. If you were a crypto skeptic or a naysayer at this time last year, people were scoffing at you like, oh, look at it. Just line continues to go up. Bitcoin's going to hit $1 million. Aren't you going to feel stupid? Well, who's laughing now?
We have a clip that's literally...
Up yours, woke crypto moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
we have a clip that is like so relevant to this discussion based on timeline and on subject matter. So I feel like this is just the perfect way to transition into that. Matt was on this beat, I believe. You uncovered this clip, right? Like you remembered this.
I didn't remember it. I did see this clip of Emmer on, I think, Fox Business that we could play, talking about the thing that I don't want to hear people talking about, particularly members of Congress saying, actually, crypto is good. We just need to regulate it. And so I decided to search his tweets for crypto-related things, and I found something pretty interesting. But first, let's play this. Play the Fox Business.
This is from this year, December 2022.
Yep.
And then we'll compare it to one from December 2021.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not about crypto. Remember, this is about centralized finance. DeFi is the point. They're going after decentralized finance. This is not what it's about.
Right.
It's not about the crypto industry. This is about Sam Bankman-Fried. It's about the regulator, Gary Gensler, and it's about centralized finance, which needs to be brought under our regulatory umbrella.
Yeah.
And Gary Gensler has done nothing to make that happen.
And I really hope you guys bring in Silicon Valley, which I think plays a major role in this, and a whole bunch of other things that have ripped off the American public. Congressman, again, congratulations. I'm glad you came on the show. Thank you.
It's definitely
Thanks,
Silicon
Charles.
Valley and not, say the banks they're trying to legitimize crypto, much like the congressman there who, like Kirsten Gillibrand, they want to regulate crypto because they're responsible. Just kidding. They want it normalized and legitimized.
Crypto is Silicon Valley and the banks combining forces to take your money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that was his statement on crypto in December 2022.
So still very much a pro crypto guy, but it's this freaking Sam Bankman-Fried guy that we just can't trust.
Yeah, he's the one big bad.
That's been the line from a lot of like the crypto
Every time it happens,
enthusiast
right?
senators. It's like it's just a single bad actor. It's not the industry that enables this. That was also I want to say Loomis's line during the Senate Banking Commission hearing on SBF and FTX as well, where she just wanted to use her time to like basically, moralize about how this is not a failure of crypto and the technology. It's a failure of a single actor, Sam Bankman-Fried. Forget about all those other actors, those other companies have gone under. It's just another single, isolated incident. But I'll let you play the other clip. I have some ideas on this.
Yeah, well, here is Mr. Emmer with a key witness, a key expert, I should say, last year in December.
We have seen disapproval letters from the SEC on multiple Bitcoin spot ETF applications. I don't know if you're aware of that. Chair Gensler's justification for not allowing Bitcoin spot ETFs to trade is his belief that Bitcoin spot markets are, quote, vulnerable to fraud and manipulation. Now, it's my understanding that FTX uses surveillance trade technology akin to the technology national securities exchanges use to protect investors and ensure sound spot markets. What does this technology and any other tools FTX uses to protect the spot market from fraud and manipulation look like?
Yeah, so, like other exchanges, we do have these technologies in addition to the, know your customer policies that we can identify individuals associated with trades. We have surveillance for unusual trading activity. We have manual inspections of anything that, gets flagged either by the automated surveillance or by manual inspection. And we do this with the trading activity, with the deposits, the withdrawals, and everything else.
Fake.
Sounds like you're doing a lot to make sure there is no fraud. Thank you, Mr. Bankman-Fried.
Thank you, Mr.
Again, for helping us understand the extensive
Sorry, that guy looks familiar.
Just 1 second, Bradley. Can you just go back a little bit? Because there's one bit I want to make sure people hear is when he thanks Sam Bankman-Fried, Sam thanks him back. And I think that's a key point to get on record. Go ahead, Bradley.
Either by the automated surveillance or by manual inspection. And we do this with the trading activity, with the deposits, the withdrawals, and everything else.
Sounds like you're doing a lot to make sure there is no fraud or other manipulation. Thank you, Mr. Bankman-Fried.
Thank you.
Again, for helping us understand the extensive guardrails a cryptocurrency exchange like FTX has in place to ensure sound crypto spot markets for investors. The SEC.
Oh, it's too good. It's too perfect.
Like FTX, specific. Talk about it highlighting individuals there, right?
The question was like, what are you doing to like prevent fraud on your platform? And SBF's answer was a lot. And he was like, perfect.
Perfect.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. No details necessary, because then I might ask questions like, okay, well, what sort of outside agencies are you having audit your books? What sort of like, actual technology, not just the assertions, are you sharing? And if these things are true, why are you outside of the U.S. jurisdiction? Why does why does FTX primarily operate out of the Bahamas and other sketchy?
Not in Minnesota where he represents. I mean, the Washington Post wrote this up. In recent years, the Republican from Minnesota has increasingly promoted crypto interests, championing its companies, pushing industry-friendly proposals, and chastising critics who in his view stand in the way of innovation. Along the way, Emmer has reaped big bucks from the industry and its top executives, including those from the since-collapsed company FTX. This was written a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But his sharp deregulatory bend could carry greater significance next year when Republicans are set to assume control of the House, blah, blah, blah.
When he is the House Majority Whip, which is the number 3rd ranking Republican in Congress, which is a useful thing to keep in mind when you have these guys trying to portray this whole scandal as like the stinking Democrats getting involved in crypto.
Yeah. The congressman declined through his spokesman to be interviewed for this story. Responding to Emmer's comments about donations, the spokesman McAdams said in the statement, it is important for industries to advocate for their priorities in a variety of ways, aka big money bags,
well, like drug dealers,
to avoid with pom-poms as well, to avoid policy fiascos that are rooted in Congress's ignorance on issues where Congress is ignorant about crypto, and through money he's just trying to educate.
Thank goodness Emmer and SBF got together to educate us so well.
I mean, that's like in the American tradition
That's what's
of education.
Actually infuriating about this, which is like every time that a guy like SBF or any of these crypto scammers gets the sort of gloss of official approval through Congress, something like that, that is money in the bank that they are then going to steal.
Yeah, they traffic in that kind of legitimacy because in reality, and this has become a line, especially post SBF, to explain the crash of FTX and a bunch of other exchanges, that there's this lack of regulatory clarity surrounding crypto in the United States. There really isn't. There isn't a lack of regulatory clarity. There is an assertion that the securities laws and commodities laws and banking laws that we already have that cover this stuff should not apply to these platforms and should not apply to these new types of tokens and DAOs and etc. But the SEC has been very clear that a lot of these tokens, especially things like FTT and like Cell token and like tokens being created by exchanges to represent the, theoretically represent the underlying value of their company, are securities. And if you trade in them, they're unregistered securities. And the laws in America are very clear about that. And you're not allowed to do it here. And so we have a lot of crypto companies, SBF included, whose argument seems to be, yeah, but we don't want those laws to apply to us. We'd like you to write new laws that inherently cover and understand that crypto is this experimental technology, this experimental asset that has to have new laws written about it. When in reality, we've seen that it operates much like other predatory assets have in the past. It operates like unregistered securities. They operate like shadow banks. They operate like penny stock pumpers. There's nothing new about it other than the assertion that like an Excel spreadsheet you can't edit is the most novel form of technology anyone's ever seen. And like the industry just wouldn't be as productive in terms of like money going in and out. Well, I guess not coming out anymore, but it wouldn't have been as lucrative for people if it had been regulated. We've seen like what a regulated crypto company looks like. I think that's Coinbase. Coinbase is regulated and they're audited by like Deloitte or something in the US, and they just they burn money because they can't traffic in some of the same things that other crypto companies outside the country can traffic in. It's just as simple as that. And so, what we do about that is a good question, but I don't think the solution is to like pretend like crypto aren't securities. We should just be like crypto are securities, like formally just provide in the law.
Right. Yeah.
Or commodities, I guess some of them are.
Well, commodities, that's what they want. That's what crypto wants. They want to be classified as a commodity, a lot less regulation around it. How long can could Congress members continue to launder the crypto's good name? There's going to be, we're already well past the point where it's obvious to everyone that this is all bullshit and a scam and it's all fraud. But they continue to push, like, what's it going to take? What, Binance and Tether collapsing? Oh no, but then the real bad apples will be out. And we'll see when Bitcoin's trading at, back to who knows what, if it's even valued at anything at all once those two collapse. Maybe then that's the future or whatever. How long are they going to continue to launder this? And I'm assuming it's just however long there are advocates in the space who keep lobbying them. That's what SBF was so good at in terms of it's clear he wasn't even good at his own fraud, being how quickly it collapsed, but he was quickly becoming the face of crypto for a lot of politicians. He was the one who had a lot to say and was the driving force behind a lot of the crypto policy that we currently have seen introduced into Congress over the past year or so. I mean, that's why he's in so many pictures with these people. This is probably why he was invited to be on this panel, because I got to tell you, FTX was not one of the major exchanges when it comes to the U.S. If you were going to invite some U.S. exchanges, FTX wouldn't, and they had what, like 4 people on that panel? FTX wouldn't have been on the top of my list there. It would have been like, I don't know, Coinbase, Crypto.com, Kraken, Gemini, but SBF got one of those seats. I mean, it just goes to show you that he was really ingratiating himself in with these people to the point where they even viewed him as like the face of crypto and was a go-to for them to put up on that panel.
Yeah, he spent a lot of money on purchasing legitimacy, perhaps too much money. And I think a lot of it too was also like, classic grifter grift, which is like acknowledging that the industry is full of fraud and scams, and also being a scammer as a way to distract from the fact that, you are a scammer by like, a lot of these companies, these exchanges, they're already secretly insolvent, he said, I think. And it's just like, yeah, they are. they are, Sam. You're right. But I mean, I think it speaks to, the priorities of our government, but it also speaks to the larger industry of crypto and, how there has to be a hardline stance against integrating this within our, larger banking and financial system because, basically they claim it's the technology still new, but it's been 12, 14 years, like 14 years into like Web 2, we had social media, we had smartphones, we had all of this other shit that people had like to ruin their lives with. And now it's just like Web 3, it's just various versions of like securities fraud, money laundering schemes, and like pictures of monkeys. And, like, I guess if you abstract our normal economy to that degree, you can make it sound like that too. But like, it's certainly, doing a speed run of like the past 300 years of finance, like people are acknowledging. It's like, and it might, if they don't get any bailout, we'll see what would happen to our economy as well if we had no safeguards, and even as people pretend like this is a free market.
Yep. All right, let's take a call really quickly. Oh, I think I know this person calling from a 917 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Alex from New York.
Alex from New York. How are you, Alex?
Good. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Christmas.
Yes, happy holidays to you as well. What's up? How are you?
I'll be good, but I got a very important question for you guys.
Okay.
Who would win? Bill Maher versus Greg Gutfeld.
Okay.
Or J.K. Rowling versus Caitlyn Jenner.
God.
Caitlyn Jenner's older.
This is a physical fight?
Yeah, Caitlyn Jenner is an Olympic athlete.
But she was a former decathlete, so I would still take her over over
30
Rowling.
years ago, 40 years ago.
Yeah, but I think that I don't know how much juice J.K. Rowling has.
Oh, I don't think she's an athlete. She doesn't know how to write about a sporting event. The rules of Quidditch are nonsensical. So,
do we even know what J.K. Rowling looks like physically beyond her face? I mean, I'm guessing she's a toothpick. I don't know.
She's 6'8".
Oh, she what? Are you
No,
what?
I actually, I don't know. I really only, I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen her like standing up, honestly. So I'm not entirely sure.
I mean, she's Hagrid's stature.
Yeah, she's 8 feet tall. She's 8 feet tall.
Now, apparently, her and Gutfield are both 5'5".
Okay.
What's the other guy going against Gutfield? Bill Maher's 5'8".
Bill Maher is a tiny little bitch.
I think Gutfeld's just crazier. So I think I'd take.
But
Maher.
Gutfeld's 5'5", and he looks like he has shorter arms. So I think
just in terms of
Maher
reach.
might actually.
I'm taking Gutfeld.
I'll take Maher on that.
Is Gutfeld the one who asked like the really, really dumb questions on the 5?
No. Oh wait, yeah, he's the one who fancies himself a comedian.
that's Kilmeade.
Like an actual.
Oh yeah, I think I'm confusing Kilmeade for Gutfeld.
Yeah, if it was Kilmeade, he would obviously lose. But Gutfeld, I guess,
they kind of
he
look
looks
alike.
like.
No, they don't. No, actually, they don't actually look alike.
Kilmeade looks like the weakest person I've ever seen. Honestly,
I'm gonna have to look up Kilmeade right now for my phone.
Yeah, Brian Kilmeade looks like the weakest
Gutfield is
person.
younger by about a decade, so maybe you go with Gutfield.
Gutfeld looks like he could have some spiciness to him if he had to a physical fight.
My good friend Zach, his mother went to high school with Bill Maher, and I've heard that Bill Maher's was always a bit of a dweeb. I think he's maybe that's informing my opinion. But yes,
No.
I think Gutfeld wins.
I looked it up. Gutfeld was who I was thinking of. I got money on Bill Maher. Gutfeld just gives off extreme Jerry energy. Like Gutfeld just like comes across as like extreme. I not to like quote Rick and Morty because I know it's like a, it's a touchy subject, very polarizing show, but he just gives off extreme Jerry energy. Like whenever he asks those like really like disingenuous questions about policing, I'm like, oh no, this guy has never defended himself with his hands.
Gutfeld's a guy who talks a big game and then runs away, I think.
I just feel like he's a little stockier. Like
he is.
He might be able to. He might. It's those guys are deceiving. It's like a 5'8" like running back in the NFL. You don't realize how powerful they are.
I mean, at the end of the day, someone burned down
Terrell Davis.
At the end of the day, someone burned down the Fox News Christmas tree last year, and they were not fearing like Greg Gutfeld coming out and like beating them up for it. I'll put that.
I mean, Jesse Waters would like go frat boy psycho on you, but Gutfeld not that formidable. But this was a good one, Alex, to end the year here.
Actually, I gotta say, I don't think that he would go. Jesse Waters would go frat boy psycho on you. Did you ever see him on the street interviews? He's like sort of cowering to some of those people who came at him. I mean, I think all those guys are probably pretty weak. I'll talk.
And Ryan Grimm squared off with Jesse Waters. So.
Yeah, but Ryan is Giga Chad, so that's the thing.
Ryan knew that Waters didn't have the juice.
Yeah, I love that story. Anyway,
because you guys have all been such good boys and girls, I'm going to give you one more.
Oh,
all right.
Kanye versus Elon Musk. Who?
Kanye versus Elon.
Look, Kanye.
Oh, come on, Kanye.
Yeah, Elon has like Rogan gut. Like I don't think he's actually healthy
Elon would start crying immediately.
Elon gives me like
That's
Bolsonaro constipation vibes.
Yeah, like perennially something going on with him physically. Or
like you would do that like kung fu punch where it's like
what'd you say?
The delayed reaction punch where it's like you punch him and then he dies a week later.
Yeah.
Am I not? That would happen to Elon, but like unintentionally.
Yeah. Not that I think Kanye's tough. I don't think that's the case.
No, but Elon is just
he's
not long
so
for this world.
Yeah.
He keeps like a fake gun on his multiple fake guns on his nightstand, right? Elon Musk, not Kanye.
That's right.
I would imagine Kanye probably has someone else carry a gun for him.
Yeah, I hope so.
At the end of the was it Milo Yiannopoulos? Oh no, that's right. He got kicked out.
He has Nick and Milo carrying for him.
All Kanye would need to do would be like to kick Elon onto his back, and I don't know if he could like actually get up by himself. So.
Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays, and I'll see you guys at the live show in January.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks so much. Always
Take
good
care.
for a good laugh. The Fight Clubs.
I got some breaking news here.
Ooh, okay.
Excuse me. Ooh, some breaking news. This is pretty crazy. Sam Bankman-Fried has just been released on bail. A record $250 million.
Who posted that?
Customers.
That's the. And
His
this is the
army
guy
of
who was
simps
saying.
came together.
This was the guy saying he only had $100K in his bank account a couple of days ago.
How much does his parents have in their bank account?
Yeah. All right.
They're like academics, right? They couldn't have that much.
No.
All right. Yeah, I have
Or
no
lawyers?
idea.
I don't know what they were.
No, they
I'm
were
surprised
both
they-
Stanford professors.
Right, yeah.
I'm surprised they even let him out on bail, honestly.
All right, well, what should we do next? Should we do this Roger Stone thing or Andrew Callahan? I want to do this. I was so excited to see that Andrew Callahan, who is a real journalist, goes around the country, speaks with people with compassion and with interest, and I just couldn't recommend Channel 5 any more than I just did. He's amazing. And we had him on the Majority Report, and that was really fun. But like people are really starting to recognize Andrew's got something good going on, and HBO got it. He has a show now. I saw it was produced by Tim Heidecker, A24, Jonah Hill, so some big names. Congrats to Andrew. And he went on CNN to promote his new HBO Max show. And there was this moment where Don Lemon and him had it wasn't a back and forth, but he said something that made Don Lemon very uncomfortable. Enjoy.
The movie's not just about like the Capitol riot and all that. It's also about like media echo chambers. You know what I mean? And like the dangers of the 24-hour news cycle, and how I think mainstream media like Fox and even CNN like competes for views by running constant 24-hour news cycles based upon fear, division, outrage, and panic, probably to like sell ads. So it's not just about the Capitol riot.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. First of all, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'm not exactly sure of how that played into people going into the Capitol and rioting on January 6th. There's nothing fake about CNN.
Oh, I'm not saying like fake news. I'm just saying ramping people up and increasing division during that period of time.
I mean, Don was pissed. And like, you can see how it's really hard for them to see. Their programming is essentially very much Trump focused. And so
right. we should specify that it's not like they were, sending out, they weren't the ones perpetuating the whole election fraud conspiracy theories and stuff like that.
No, of course not.
But in essence,
he wasn't saying that either.
Right. But I think that's how Don Lemon seemed to have taken it when he interjected.
Right, but it doesn't compute though when he's trying to say what he's trying to say is that CNN does something separate, which is one that like they have no accountability at all about what they did in the lead up to the 2016 election, showing Trump's empty podium while Bernie Sanders was holding massive rallies. They gave him free press constantly, and then when anyone deigns to criticize them on their platform, I don't agree with that. I mean, he was taken aback.
Also, like, frankly, like...
Sorry, Binder, I know I cut you off.
We know
No, I was going to say that same thing. And, their CNN, I think president or CEO, Jeff Zucker at the time, he's not there anymore. He even came out and said that, Trump was great for ratings. That is the point here with what that CNN guest, what's his name again? Andrew
Callahan. Yeah.
Andrew Callahan was trying to make. I just don't think it connected to Don Lemon. He was just ready to defend CNN from the idea that they had anything to do with January 6th. I mean, as directly as Fox and the other right-wing channels that literally were saying, go to the Capitol building and help defend Trump's presidency. No, of course not. But in essence of building up Trump and help fomenting this rabid fan base around him, they certainly played a part. Their very own president or CEO, whoever Jeff Zucker was there at the time, admitted such.
Like, CNN is essentially, like, they were the forerunners of, like, the ESPNizing of cable news. Like, where it's just screaming talking heads in boxes, like, yelling at each other about the issues of the day with, like, a timer, basically. And, like...
Tucker Carlson had a CNN show.
Tucker Carlson had a CNN show, Crossfire, with Paul Begala, where, again, that's not news. That's a Democratic operative and a Republican operative screaming at each other. Like, see, there are many shows on CNN that are a lot of their panels are not really designed to actually inform the public. It's more like, hey, this is something that's going on in the world. Let's fight about it.
But I just have, I mean, it's larger than anything to do with Trump, as you say, Bradley, right? It is about the nature of their work, which is one that, like, chooses to make people feel like they're informed when they have something on in the background, but doesn't actually do anything to inform their audience. I mean, the headlines, yes. The
way they covered like a plane mysteriously disappearing somewhere, like all that bullshit. It's all bullshit. That's how CNN and the like long term of their process is like when CNN came onto the scene. All these newspapers had massive foreign desks and foreign bureaus, and they were doing all this reporting, and the money moved away from that into TV, and CNN was like, oh, look at us, we're the global broadcaster, and they've been cutting back on all of that stuff the last decades or so. So it's like their impact on how we understand the world is negative.
And they became massive during the Gulf War, I believe, and they were instrumental in people sitting down for dinner, turning on CNN and watching big shiny bombs cascade onto villages and say, like, look at American might, and we're on the ground and reporting on this very seriously, not reporting on what the reality of the situation was there, which is that during the Gulf War, the United States decimated Iraq to such a degree that a disease spread in their water, killed many people. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but their entire infrastructure was completely depleted, all because it was a war based on geopolitical positioning, and it was the prelude to the disastrous war where we killed hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq. And because the American public did not have an understanding of that and were more interested in seeing red and blue team go boom, it greased the wheels for the Iraq war. And so that's the accountability that CNN needs to engage in, and it's embedded in the infrastructure of their network. That is the nature of the 24 news cycle, and how they have created it has allowed for the Hollywoodification of war crimes.
And when you see how this plays out with something like the sort of rail strike, which is like in the lead up to it, it's the workers, rail workers, showing a little bit of democracy, saying, "Hey, we're going to strike for our what we demands here, including the sick day stuff." CNN was all like, "Is this too extreme? What about the economy?" And then, I mean, ultimately, after it was in hand and taken care of by Biden and Congress, then they started doing the special interests, like, oh, people, but they were playing the role that they wanted to. We have this old clip of, didn't it go into sound polls?
I think the link didn't send. Yeah.
What I was saying too is like we'll get that because we wanted to play this that Matt's gonna send me. Also consider the emphasis that they put on certain things. Like we'll watch this, I think, but we'll remember the compilation of videos we watched of people. I think Don Lemon was literally featured in the video twice of being like, is the rail strike worth it because of what it might do to the economy? Christmas is right around the corner. What about all the gifts that little Timmy won't be able to get under his Christmas tree because the rail strikers want more than one goddamn day of paid sick leave? And then, meanwhile, commissioning an entertainment journalist to go sit down with Jeff Bezos and his new partner to be like, you know what? Before I cryogenically freeze myself and move to Mars while the planet experiences its heat death, I'm gonna give away most of my wealth. And then her response, her follow-up question being like, "Why are you so brave?
Yeah.
What makes you so valiant in your pursuit of unspeakable, ungodly amounts of money?" So it's just like beyond just the Trump stuff. It's also like the when you look at that stuff thematically, money is good. Labor impedes economic progress. Like labor strength impedes all of this stuff is all like this stuff just seeps into people, just like you said, just by having it be the soundtrack of their lives, let alone it just be anything about Trump or January 6th.
The one I specifically remember off the top of my head right now is like back in like 2021 and like the early 2021 when COVID was still in full swing. I mean, it still is. We're just choosing to pretend it isn't. But when COVID was in full swing and they were still getting the initial vaccinations out, they had on some small business owner in New York City, some art gallery guy, who went on to complain about how the COVID restrictions were hurting his business so much. And if you looked up this guy online, you would find out that he was like positioning himself for months and months at this point now as like one of like the leading like COVID denial guys. And they were just like on air positioning him as like just a small business owner, really worried about, how everything is going. And it was just so disingenuous. And they had this guy on without anyone to put forward the opposite sort of, even if you wanted to have that discussion, which at that time I still think is completely ridiculous. It was completely ridiculous. But even if you wanted to have that discussion, it was just presenting his and so many outlets, but especially I feel like CNN did this. It was constant interviews with small business owners throughout 2021, pointing out how difficult it was for them they can't find any workers. They can't find people to hire during COVID. Well, yeah, there's a pandemic going on, but they were framing it as like the government was allowing all these people to live off these social safety nets that they provided during the pandemic and how this was hurting businesses and people needed to get back out there and work and stop being so lazy. That to me was just like the most recent example of like just absolute mainstream media failing at covering something in the most obvious and disgusting way, honestly.
Do we want to play this?
Can we talk about it? Can we talk about a coverage failure by
Yeah,
Todd
I mean,
Levin?
and this is not again.
This is just funny. This is more just like a funny.
But this kind of crap is exactly why their like highfalutin opinion of what they do is grating to me. But here we go.
Now, stupid me. A lot of people have been asking about that, about black holes and on and on and on, and all of these conspiracy theories. Let's look at this. Noah says, what else can you think about? Black hole, Bermuda Triangle. And then Deji says, just like the movie Lost. I know it's preposterous, but is
Not
it
even a movie.
preposterous, you think, Mary?
I mean, yeah, you don't need to listen to Stuart.
You know,
that's so infuriating because that's entirely driven by profit.
I'm all for having fun, but I think, it's troubling. Yeah, we can talk about the possibility that a wormhole ate up a plane. That's fun. We can have fun. I don't want to not have fun, but I think, it's their opinion of themselves and also how they get very, standoffish or self-righteous when you like imply a very not imply or even just like straight up say that like, hey, the money and the source of funding for your channels or for your media outlet is going to inherently bias your reporting or color your reporting. I think it's very troubling that people in our media have a certain, posture that they take on critical thinking about the ways in which the context or like the funding or like the sources of information affect their, not just veracity, that's speaking of like fake news versus real news, but like just the way things are covered. Obviously people are going to have different opinions about events that are covered, but there's just posture being taken, not just by CNN, but by New York Times, by Washington Post, that they're above like being questioned about the objectivity of their reporting, and how even in the face of evidence, that it seems to be towards a very specific ideological position. Sometimes that's pro-black hole, sometimes that's anti-union, anti-labor. They just want to be judged based on like very, very shallow, lazy comparisons to some of the worst actors in their particular industry. Like, we may be CNN and we're on 24-hour news cycle that's paid for by like weapons manufacturers or something, but like we're not as bad as Fox News. But, even in the sense that they aren't as bad as Fox News or doing promoting people going out to January 6th rallies or at the White House or at the Capitol building, they are certainly contributing to an atmosphere where people sort of are uncritical about the source of information that they take in, and they just view things that they see on TV as being relatively true and not worth looking up. There's no like encouragement to like, hey, not that this is people's jobs, but like if you hear something that sounds wrong on CNN, maybe look it up. Maybe like go out, find some, verifiable sources, find some like, more like peer-reviewed sources and look up what other people are saying about it. They want to have people trapped in their own specific silo of information and then chastise people if they question where their information is coming from, how it's being sourced, how it's being processed, etc. And, when people fall into different silos, their issue with conspiracy theories, like obviously can't be, total because they bring on conspiracy theorists onto their website. I mean, in their channel to talk about planes disappearing into wormholes. Like their issue with conspiracy theories and propaganda is that you should be, consuming only theirs. And it's not propaganda, it's objective news, but it's like, there's no such thing as like objective news. The news is inherently reductive even before you like, start filtering it through like commentary because you have to decide what's worth reporting. And obviously someone is making an editorial decision at some point that something is worth reporting over other things. And whether it's ideologically, because we're a right wing or centrist leaning magazine, or it's because of financial reasons, like people like taking listicles, like those are decisions that are being made and they have inherent effects on like the things that are covered and the way they're covered. And that's just not.
It's almost less of what you of how you cover something. It is more also what you cover. And I feel that is like they entirely miss that point because they're like they have blinders on or have cognitive dissonance about the profit motive motivating it, which is like it's not that the plane was the most important thing for us to learn about constantly. And the whole Stewart segment has like, he goes into depth about how much they were really covering this plane. It's because that is a profit motive. So that's like most of it.
Because it's simple. Like that doesn't require any actual, you just get these people to zoom in basically and speculate bullshit. There's no actual like work being done besides just like, oh yeah, black holes. I mean, wow.
Yeah, but the 24
imagine that.
The 24-hour news cycle also like implies a lot of things to the people who are like only vaguely engaged with it. It implies that 24 hours is enough time or sufficient time to cover all the news. in the world that's worth covering, even if most of the shows are going to be covering the same thing, or like, some of them are going to be like light view-esque talk shows like Fox and Friends where they cover the same thing from a different, more casual angle. And also that like, you're going to go into enough depth to, like, if you have 24 hours to actually get at all of the angles. And neither of things are happening. But what it does do is, like, when things fall out of the 24-hour news cycle, people think that the solution has happened. A lot of people just assume when something stops being covered, and therefore people, stop watching it because it's stopped being covered, that the problem has just been solved. And a lot of problems just never get solved, and people just feel like they've been solved because one day, you just stop hearing about a mass shooting in the news. And so you assume that, like, everything was taken care of in that town, and then, like, every so often they'll pop up like, oh, 10 years later, Parkland's still dealing with the trauma of a mass shooting. Sandy Hook's still dealing with the trauma. And so it just, we just live we live in a world, I think, where like the 24-hour news cycle just gives a false sense of resolution to a lot of our structural problems that are just every so often just take everyone by surprise.
I will say that to their credit, when you talk about, deep coverage, I would say the black hole scenario for that missing plane was certainly a very deep. They went deep for that one. I mean,
oh yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, if you have no news for a story, if you have nothing new to report on for a story, like clearly that was a big story, that missing plane at the time, and clearly that was a ratings. They saw that it brought ratings, but the plane was missing. Nobody found anything. There was no additional information out there. Clearly, they made a decision to do this off-the-walls, bizarre, offbeat, conspiratorial coverage because they had nothing new to report on about it that was legitimate. So they just came up with something new from a pure ratings and monetization standpoint. I mean, that's why they did that. There's also, we talk about like coverage and how they don't get too in depth with things. There's also, in this scenario, in our example scenario, this was a case where they covered every angle we knew about, and then they just had to go bizarre with the angles they covered it on because it was a ratings driver that they had nothing new to report on about.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's should we do this Neil deGrasse Tyson thing, or am I? Yeah,
Did a new movie about space come out that he wants to ruin,
dude,
it hasn't been 2014 in a long time. I didn't know if people were still like messing with Neil deGrasse.
I'll tell you.
Is it an opportunity for me to talk about Elon Musk?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
so
let's do it.
While casting shade, speaking of 2014,
I saw this tweet and I responded to it, and then I saw a bunch of like other lefties were responding to it as well. Neil deGrasse Tyson tweeted this out. While casting shade on Elon Musk for what he's done, is doing, or will do, try to pause. All right. Try to pause and remember that he made electric cars a normal thing in society. And all right, okay. Well, okay, we'll get to that in a second.
Much for a scientist.
For profit motive, and also like was trying to make them exclusive, the charging stations exclusive to him for profit. And now he's seeing that that's falling away, and that's why he's getting desperate with Twitter because other car companies are integrating electric cars. But beside the point, this part is the weirdest part for me. Saying it like it's a good thing. And he commercialized space for cargo, satellites, and people. Count him among those who are inventing civilization's future. And he said commercialized space like it's a good thing. It's one thing for the scientific community to be rightly incredibly excited about space exploration. I find space exploration exciting. I think that it was done well when it was funded by the state. And since then, since it's been privatized, mostly what it has been, yes, commercialization, where private entities like SpaceX and Starlink and whatever are making this their new frontier so that capitalists can corner the market on scientific exploration in this very exciting area. And it's a shame to me that one of like the leading people alive, when people think of a scientist, they'll think of Neil deGrasse Tyson, is promoting commercialization in the name of scientific innovation as something that is aspirational, as opposed to really depressing that science is at the whims of a psycho like this. And that there is really no future for the rest of us in that area because it's been commercialized and enclosed by one of the wealthiest people on the planet. That's depressing, not exciting.
Yeah, I
No,
mean, enclosure is
absolutely.
the key word. You go ahead, Binder.
No, I was just gonna say absolutely spot on. I mean, also the idea of him like the part about Tesla where he made it. What was the exact quote? He made electric
cars a normal thing in society.
What does that even mean? A normal thing in society?
Yeah,
That's not even that's not even a way to frame it. I mean, if you want to look at what he's done, even at that standpoint, if you look at the emissions he puts out there with his private jet that we know about because of accounts like Elon Jet, if you look at his Bitcoin, Tesla's own Bitcoin investments, there was a study when Tesla bought all those Bitcoin last year that found that Tesla's Bitcoin investment basically wiped out any environmental positives that Tesla had put out there. Like literally the amount of Bitcoin they purchased in terms of the emissions from the mining of these Bitcoins and everything, it basically erased any sort of green energy savings that Tesla had done with all of the cars they sold. And then you look at, his travels, like I said. I mean, this is a guy who has portrayed himself exactly as Neil deGrasse Tyson is portraying him. And Neil deGrasse Tyson has bought it hook, line, and sinker. I mean, this isn't who Elon Musk actually is. He sold himself as this great savior of humanity when in reality, anyone who believes that, just even if he says it, is just ridiculous. There's going to be no single individual who can do that. It's going to take society as a whole to come together and do the things that we need to do to save us from any sort of climate catastrophe. And that's something that needs to be spearheaded by world governments, because no company, no individual, no matter how rich they are, has the power to actually make that difference. And to believe that Elon Musk, of all people, is that person. I mean, we already know who Elon Musk is. Now we're learning who Neil deGrasse Tyson is.
Yeah, well, we've kind of also slowly been learning about
that's
Neil
true.
deGrasse
Right.
Tyson. But yeah, like
It sounded nice to say it that way.
Right.
So
yeah, I don't want to get in the way of your poetry, but the thing is, like, I have a real problem with that. Like, first of all, General Motors made an electric vehicle between 1996 and 1999. People can go into Who Killed the Electric Car documentary for that. I mean, one theory is like investor sort of into fossil fuels, but that's what people can go into the documentary for the back for. But like the Honda Insight also existed. Like what Elon did was basically make it something that investors thought that they could get in on early and make a whole bunch of money on. That's the normalization that he did.
Yeah, I think Elon's best quality is selling himself as like a celebrity scientist, celebrity billionaire, and people are really only interested in the celebrity part.
Mhm.
You know, the scientist part, the billionaire part are like the parts that people find like aspirational, but at least in like the material sense. But it's the celebrity part that like leads a lot of people to defend him. But from my perspective, Teslas, they're not that great. Obviously they're always having issues with their AI. I think a new story came out where like one caused a 8-car pileup recently in San Francisco, which you hear stories like that all the time. He's experimenting. Even if he did make, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, even if he did make like Teslas or like electric vehicles cool amongst a certain subsect of our population that didn't think it was cool already, okay, good for him. Same with space travel, people who otherwise wouldn't have thought it was cool. It's like the idea, and I think this is prevalent in our society too, especially with cancel culture being like the albatross of the public intellectual, public official, is the idea like if you become famous like for anything, you no longer have the burden of having to at least try to get people to like you. It's like people didn't like Teslas because of something that they were offering better than other electric vehicles at the time, because except for maybe the auto driving part, and a lot of those were sold on lies. And we know the Tesla's value was intrinsically attached to Elon Musk's celebrity stature. And now that more people are getting to know what kind of person he is, they don't like him as much. And whenever that happens to celebrities, like a bunch of celebrities circle the wagon and make it seem like you're not allowed to change your mind about somebody. Like people aren't allowed. Like if I ever become like super famous for like, you know, people liking me or whatever, like I no longer have the burden after a certain point to like still be liked by people. I just get to be around, you know, and people just have to deal with it. It's like, well, you know, he's running a business. He's running a business that is now seems like it's not doing very well because more people are acquainted with the fact that he's not very scientifically literate, you know, at least in code, and he's not a very good business person. And we have companies like Ford and Hyundai and other like, you know, affordable sedan makers making electrical vehicles. And then we also have higher end luxury brands like Ferrari and Lamborghini and like, you know, probably Rolls Royce and like all the typical names people have heard of, Audi, making luxury electric vehicles. And then we have other companies making real driverless AI piloting vehicles, and he's not doing any of that stuff particularly very well. And so he's probably going to get boxed out of the market unless he, you know, now that his celebrity stature is falling apart too. Like,
and the self-driving thing and AI, I think, is really key as well, because this is something that he's been doing for a while. That's been the white whale that he has, I guess, advertised for his investors. It has driven more people into like seeing a future in Tesla where the technology, based on a lot of reporting on it, is nowhere near the place where it is advertised to be. And so that was, I think, probably it should be an indicator for people where this was going with Tesla, or it should have been, because that was his desperate attempt to drive up Tesla's stock price. And then he attempted here with Twitter in order to like increase his celebrity stature and do the same kind of thing as that technology that you describe, Brandon, is rolling out with, like, you know, Mercedes, Porsche coming out with their own electric vehicles. He feels the walls closing in, and these are these desperate attempts that should be mocked and not lionized by people like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Also, can I just say, sorry to interrupt you, Brandon, not to pull a Tim Pool here and reference a Marvel movie, but I don't know if you guys recall in the first Iron Man, Tony Stark is at a congressional committee hearing, and he's asked something by like a stuffy senator being like, why do you think you can take care of our country's national security more than we can? And he goes, it's simple. I've just privatized world peace. Yeah. And I found that statement so fascinating in the context of this, as if it's similar to me in the sense that deGrasse Tyson sees that as like a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
And that version of Tony Stark, before he realizes when he gets kidnapped in the Middle East and that his own missiles are supplying the terrorists without his knowledge, that they're the dangers of such a thing, that Neil deGrasse Tyson really seemingly didn't really learn the lesson of the movie.
You know, it sounds
perfect
cute,
you brought that. It's perfect you brought that movie up too, because Elon Musk actually makes a cameo in Iron Man 2.
Yeah,
yes, that's right, at the Monaco Grand Prix.
As like sort of trying to portray him as like in the, you know, in the same sort of category as the Tony Starks of the world.
He's Mickey Rourke's stunt
go ahead,
double.
Brandon. Yeah,
that's all I was going to say. You probably it's so quick you miss it. And it's so quick you miss it. In some situations, if you pause the frame, you just see like Elon Musk in a terrible wig and like really bad like fake prison tattoos. But go ahead, finish your thought.
I will say that like it's amazing that like all those extras that he added to Teslas is seen as like a positive to some people, like the AI stuff and the big monitor screen in the front and all the little perks and all the stuff that makes it. Yeah, because if anything, like imagine if that first big electric vehicle company actually focused on affordability, just focused on the green aspect and made the most affordable electric vehicle without all these bells and whistles, and put it out there and made it cool and made it popular, a lot more people would be driving them. Like he made it into a luxury vehicle. So I think there's actually a lot of people who connect electric vehicles with luxury vehicles when that shouldn't be the case. All those extras aren't necessary. Tesla should be selling for well under like $20K, and yet it's like the entry for Tesla is like over $50,000. It's if he really cared, there would have been at least one model of Tesla that was absolutely like one of the most affordable cars on the market to show people what this could be like. But he didn't didn't care to do that because it was all about the money and all about the notoriety of like the cool bells and whistles. The AI driving thing was definitely a priority to him, well over any idea of like being a green company.
Well, I mean, people probably forget now, but going back, I think, early 2017, 2018, or some like few years ago, he was saying how like you'll be able to like send your driverless Tesla out to do Uber trips by itself and make money that way. Like the kind of promises he was making about the AI technology early in Tesla were incredibly, grandiose. And I think, now like to the point about the cars, I'm sure what he would say is that like Tesla's not a car company, because that's the classic excuse for why like your thing is not selling very well. He would say Tesla is like an AI driverless company or like an energy producing company, but it doesn't seem like it does those things that well either. Comparatively to like companies that specialize in those things. It just seems like he's just trying to make the world's coolest company, a la Iron Man. Like I remember when he was making flamethrowers and like doing that kind of stupid shit too. And I think it's probably caught up to him.
Yeah.
Tech stocks have generally been overpriced for a while now. Stock was overpriced in comparison to other car companies. It was, if you want to compare it to other tech companies like Apple and, Amazon, I would say why? It certainly is not doing the kind of like broad spectrum of business that they're doing. And, Elon Musk just doesn't seem to be very good at business because, if you're going to buy an advertising platform, while you're also running, other businesses, you have to imagine that a lot of the advertisers that are competitors of your other business aren't going to want to run ads on like Twitter. Like, so companies like Ford, companies like, Audi that would normally run as more car ads on the website will stop. So like he doesn't seem to be a very good businessman or very good scientist, but he is a very good aspirational figure for people who want to imagine themselves as reaching a certain level of, I think, attainment that allows them to go like, fuck you to everybody. Like I don't need to be, I don't need to worry about my competitors in business. I don't need to worry about like, public opinion. I can just like act unilaterally because like the government can't stop me, a la Iron Man. But like that's just not the way the world works. People like resist it when it happens to like even the shittiest of celebrities like Kanye. They want to make excuses for because everyone imagines that one day they'll get like a lottery ticket and then they can say fuck you to the their boss in the world. And you certainly can. You just can't also run a business while doing that. Obviously.
Yeah. Right. I love when people are like, "Oh, he's."
I'm sorry, guys. That the privatized world peace quote and the Elon cameo were both in Iron Man 2. And
I'm glad we got that.
And Tony Stark getting kidnapped in the Middle East was the first Iron Man.
Yes.
I was getting a lot of hate in the YouTube chat, so just need to correct the record.
I'm glad you brought that up because I mean that's who like his his sycophants, his simps. They all say like, oh, Elon Musk is like the real life Tony Stark just without the Iron Man suit. Well, guess what? Tony Stark is fucking lame without the Iron Man suit. Who gives a shit about Tony Stark? He's an a-hole. The whole point is the Iron Man suit. So without that, I mean, you could continue that comparison. I guess it's spot on.
Also, I mean, Tony Stark would tell you that without the suit, he's still like a genius, and like Elon Musk can't even seem to run like a social media website profitably.
Yeah. Nope.
Like he had to invent like square avatars, piss yellow check marks. It's just not like. I know Iron Man iterates on like different versions of his suit like every week, but this is not that.
All right, we're going to take one more call, read some IMs, and we are going to get out of here.
I do appreciate him bringing the phrase woke mind virus into the lexicon. I love that so much.
Calling from a 503 area code. Oh my God.
Hang that one up.
We have to hang up. I'm sorry.
It's like a predator.
Okay.
Sounds like they've got the woke mind virus.
Sounds like it. Calling from a 336 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, I guess I got a second try in. Jay again from North Carolina.
Jay from North Carolina. You're the final call of the day. What's on your mind?
We talked about the Senate on Monday on reform. Might as well just go with the 22nd Amendment instead of the 17th and expanding the term limits to legislative and judicial branch.
Okay.
Since we were talking about the Senate aspect, I guess we would just keep the current form that we would have, although I agree with what you said about the House of Lords, turning art into a parliament. Sam was right about which is also my idea of making it more representative. Of course, I would yield towards that and just abolishing the Senate, but digress. Expansion towards the term limit, I would say for Congress, would be probably 4 terms for Congress members.
I gotta say, I'm not super big term limit guy. I think as long as somebody can get votes from the people, they should be allowed to run. Generally, I think if we're looking at reforms to the current electoral system, I would prioritize things like making election days national holidays, and expanding like vote by mail and things like that. Before I would want to do more term limits, because I don't, for instance, think like Bernie should get term limited out or something.
But
like
happy,
that.
right, exactly. But happy for term limits for Supreme Court justices because they are not democratically elected.
Right, exactly. Yes,
Right.
all those,
Yeah.
all of those
Yeah.
should definitely
Yeah,
be term limited.
that's one of the things I was also thinking is that we should elect the Supreme Court judges, and they could have a term limit of like a senator, 6 years, but 2 terms maximum.
Okay. Yeah, I
So
mean,
they
I
would
don't know
have
if
a maximum of 12 years.
we can possibly directly elect them. That might create some weird incentives as well. But the notion of they also can be curbed, their ability to review democratically passed legislation through Congress. I think that could be something that you could do as well.
I'm definitely in favor of like a bucket of campaign finance reforms being pushed through. Maybe less than term limits is something that I don't give too much thought to, but certainly like a bar on how long you can go, or rather an extension of how long you can go after leaving office before working for like private industry.
That too,
Even if
yeah.
that means that like we have to keep like people who have been senator for 2 years on some sort of like public stipend for like 3 or 4 years. You should be limited in the kind of investing and the kind of lobbying and the kind of just generally the jobs you can take post working for, not just like the Senate or Congress as a congressperson.
Well, that's funny that you say that, because I had something written down like campaign finance and anti-financial lobbyism as an amendment, which would have like 5 sections within it.
All right. Well, Jay, thank you so much.
I would have to call in tomorrow.
Yeah, good suggestions. Really appreciate it. Have a good day, all right?
All right, you too.
Thanks so much. All right, well, with that, we're going to read some IMs, and then we will get out of here. Congressional baseball fan, term limits for Congress is a conservative argument. Yeah, I mean, I'm not in favor of it either. But term limits for Supreme Court justices, sign me up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the major difference is as long as somebody can turn out. I mean, look, it is sort of FDR, but this is generally like I think term limits are anti-democratic. I understand the pro-democracy reasons that people find themselves supporting them, but you really need to make voting and democracy more robust, and also the sort of like weight of incumbency through making donors networks and stuff like that more important, less powerful.
Right. There's just not enough progressive candidates who get elected into Congress. And when we do, we need them to stick around for as long as possible.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't want AOC out just because she's term limited. She's young, and that district should be held by a Democrat for a long time. I'd prefer she's the Democrat.
Yeah.
Eddie Munster, abolish Congress, Twitter poll for every policy.
I love the whole Twitter poll thing he does, because it's always like a scenario that everyone starts lauding him for being so democratic, but any like regular like average intelligence person wouldn't have even posed those two options to begin with. It's literally like should I shoot this dog in the head or in the foot? Well, and then everyone picks in the foot, and they're like, oh, Elon's so great. He's only going to shoot the dog in the foot because we said so. Well, a normal person would just not shoot the dog at all. His questions are all ridiculous.
It's a microcosm of a billionaires experimenting with democracy, which is like, if they can use it to sort of ratify decisions that they make on their own, then great. If they don't, just ignore the decisions. And then when you can make it also useful to attacking others, like he is now with this whole taking a poll on should we do this spending bill. Like, bro, you ignored the last poll that said you were going to step down.
Yeah.
And so now you're thinking about this completely unscientific poll of just your loser fans who care about this one, saying, we actually spend too much, that it's authoritarian or whatever, is ridiculous.
I like how it's bad science and bad business. Like it's bad science, especially some of the way he phrases these questions. Like although they still end up being quite funny. Like his one about like how real time doxing, which didn't happen. Like he basically phrased it was just like, should people be allowed to post my assassination coordinates, leading to me be murdered in real time on Twitter? And people are like, yes. How like people were making new accounts to vote yes, probably, which is also why it's unscientific, even if you turn out to win. But also it's just like bad form to have like a public vote of no confidence on your like own business platform. It's just like, this is not going to bring the advertisers back. Most advertisers do not care about like this really lazy seeming democracy production that he's putting on for like the worst people on Twitter.
Yeah. F from Nebraska, or E from Nebraska says, Neil deGrasse Tyson had a really thoughtful episode on his podcast that went through the subject of billionaires in space. Well, not as thoughtful as that, sounds more thoughtful than that tweet.
I mean, I would be interested to hear that because it sounds like he is in the sort of milieu of billionaires funding space research and willing to go a long way to do PR for them.
To quote my flat Earth community friends, Neil the ass Tyson.
Libtardo got it. Libtardo 2. The only reason Elon normalized e-cars is because other car and oil companies sat on patents on purpose and then turned around and tried to make things proprietary. It's a problem of capitalism that we are forced to rely on rich assholes. Eddie from South Georgia, have y'all been paying attention to communist armed American patriot Haxon Dinkle? He absolutely lost his fucking mind. He equated Matt Binder to Hitler on drugs on Twitter when Matt went on with Joy Reid. Hugs.
I saw that.
Huge love to the MR crew. Rest well. I don't care about him at all.
Yeah, I think it's kind of
feel like
attention.
let's just please just move on. It's not worth
It was
our
very
time.
stupid. It was very stupid. Yeah.
Narrator, will you keep the same energy for the Democratic Party funding MAGA candidates and therefore raising the profiles of the often most bigoted candidates this last election cycle? We have made this point a million times on this program, and so you can go back to our other segments on this very topic because I'm really sick of this same question being
same
asked
energy as
over
what,
and
though?
over again. I don't know.
Also, though, it worked for them in this midterms. I mean, I hate to say it,
That's
but
exactly
it
right.
worked for
That's
them.
exactly right. And we've gone through this
Every
question
single one of them lost.
40 different times on the Majority Report.
Also, be specific about what same energy you want to keep because you're in your head on that one, thinking people know what you mean.
Big Green Joe 01. When they say COVID is over, it only means any coordinated, rational response to COVID is over. Yes. Ad hominem. Kowalski's greenhouse suggestion was as revelatory to me as reading Kim Stanley Robinson novels about climate futures. We need more imaginative visions of the future like this. Yes. Matt from New Jersey, congrats on your first MRA meats rights activist caller, especially impressive. He managed to come with the same overbearing energy that people often associate with vegans. All right, 3 more.
I'm getting flack from both sides on that, and somebody called me a flat earther, and I would just say like, I'm willing to hear that duked out, but the idea that it's flat Earth to think that there's some sort of trade-offs with regards to how we use land use in this country is, I think, a little bit.
I missed this discourse.
3 more. Bland, racist Tony Stark. The House doesn't need term limits. They need longer terms. House members spend a year campaigning for a 2-year term, only to turn around and start campaigning a year into their term. It's ridiculous. House seats should be 4-year terms.
They need expanded staff budgets as well. This is one thing FDR did, which is like, if you're going to have a government that actually governs a modern country, you can't have like the staff sizes of a country that was basically 75% to 2/3 the size of the population.
Antifa Lockhart, I have driven myself insane understanding what NFTs and crypto are because they're so contrary to reality and advertised as opposite of what they are, and it's vindicating that it's finally burning to the ground. It's me, the guy with the sicko shirts outside the window laughing. Yes, ha ha ha, yes, yes. And the final I am of the day, Elon Musk's poll tax. The war on Christmas has been won. Conservatives receive only bootstraps this year. All right, guys, great show. We're doing ESVN early, right after this, youtube.com/ESVN show. Check it out. Brandon, Binder, Matt, Bradley, thanks so much. Final of these shows of the year.
All right. Happy holidays,
bye-bye.
everyone. Happy New
Great
Year.
job this year, guys.
Yes, awesome stuff. Appreciate you all. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.